All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Today is Tuesday, February 21st, 2023, and I'm welcoming you to a work session of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County. It is an absolutely beautiful day today in Manatee County, and we're going to start in our typical fashion. We're going to start by honoring God and by honoring our great nation. So Commissioner James Satcher is going to lead us in prayer, after which Marine Corps veteran and Commissioner Jason Bearden will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So at this time, if you're able, please stand.
Lord, this morning we come before you, and first of all, I just want to say that we're grateful. We thank you for that even though you are all powerful and all good, you still allow us to come and speak with you. You're a good God. You're not so far off that we can't get to you or touch you. Lord, you care about each of us. The God of the universe is concerned with the affairs of men, and for that we are grateful. Lord, I pray that today you would lead our discussion, that you would guide us. Lord, we thank you for your hand of protection over this entire county and over this country. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's always nice to get started off with the guys who have the fresh haircuts. And staying with that, we're going to now go to our acting county administrator, Lee Washington, to kick things off.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Although today's agenda is quite light, there are two discussions that the board has identified that they'd like to have more information on. And starting off this morning, we're going to have an update on the county's investments by the Clerk of the Circuit Court, Angelina Calaneso, and followed by our Library Services Manager to speak about the library operations and its day-to-day makeup. So, Madam Clerk.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Commissioners. And thank you for inviting us here today. What you're going to see today, I'm going to turn this over fairly quickly. I'm going to do the introductions, and I'm then going to turn it over to Deep Blue Investments, to Ken Couch, and to Dominic Cristofaro. And we are going to go over this. A little background, though, I wanted to put out there with the investment policy. I think you may have that before you. You might have received that. That was actually something, just to give you a history, when the county was transitioning, we just offered to go out and pay and deal with having it rewritten by the county's own financial advisors through PRAG, which is the group that handles the bonds for the county. So they drafted it, and our now investment advisors have looked at it. It's been around about 2 years, so it's a policy that we'd like to discuss further with you because it's your policy. But it still needs to be, it's an upgrade. There's been no material changes through the years. The law is still the same, but it's a new policy in a new world, and I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, it got a facelift to modernize it a little bit. So that's the background. So with the policy being there, I think the best way to go, at the end of this, you'll see the monthly investment report that will be coming your way monthly, and it's a comprehensive report that Deep Blue will be preparing for you all. And there will be a suggestion slide at the end of this. One of the things that I would like to suggest is a committee. Pinellas County does this, and it involves the clerk, the clerk's authorized staff, one commissioner because of sunshine, and a representative from the county's investment advisory firm with investment experience. And that committee would annually review the investment policy and recommend changes to the investment policy where needed. It would be reviewed annually. The policy would be reviewed annually, which I like, because then we always know it's being kept up to speed yearly by a committee, and reviewing the strategies and monitoring the results, and review the quarterly and annual investment reports. I will say happily at this time, after about 4 months into our new fiscal year, we're already up to $18 million in interest. So we expect to double or more than double what we did last year. So without further ado, I will hand this over to, I'm not sure who's going to speak today. Okay, Ken? Would you prefer them be in front?
Yes.
at the podium.
Yeah, whoever's presenting should stand at the podium. And for the record, please introduce yourself.
So we're going to kind of tag team this, if that's okay. I'm Ken Couch. I'm the National Director for Client Advisory Services with Deep Blue Investment Advisors. And this is my colleague, Dominic Cristofaro, who just got promoted to a director position, so we're very proud of his accomplishment. If you're not familiar with Deep Blue Investment Advisors, we are an independent asset management firm. We're not a bank, we're not a broker-dealer, and we only deal with local governments, counties, school districts. We work with the school district here, and cities and special districts. So it's local governments and not-for-profits that we deal with solely. As we go through the presentation today, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the details. There's some highlights in there that we want to hit on. And so if we go to the agenda section here, yeah, so these are the things that we're going to cover today is the portfolio status, the policy and current practice, investment officer considerations, role of a board to the investments, and role of an investment committee, and investment policy recommendations. So I'm going to let Dominic kind of take us through the first couple pages here.
Okay, great. So the first few pages here, we're going to talk about the portfolio status. As of the end of the fiscal year, September 30th, the total assets of the plan were approximately just over $1.4 billion. The portfolio over last fiscal year had a net earnings, which includes interest in any other gains and losses, of $7.5 million, which is a huge amount considering if you think back about a year before that where interest rates were. So this is something that we looked at other counties, and your county has done an excellent job of making sure that you can earn the most for your county. So $7.5 million was an excellent amount.
And when he says excellent amount too, one of the things we looked at is your neighboring counties, some of your neighboring counties. How did you do compared to your neighboring counties? And you actually outperformed like Charlotte, and I believe Sarasota was the other one that we looked at. So you did good. And last year was an unprecedented year when the Fed raised rates 7 times, and not just a quarter here and maybe a quarter there. It was a high velocity of 50 basis points, which is 0.5%, or 75 basis points, which is 0.75%. That was huge. That had a huge impact on the market. So to earn what you guys earned last year was really well done by the clerk and her staff.
So the next page here is just basically your cash and investment balances as of January. So this is updated from September. So as of January 31st, your total balance was about $1.8 billion. Your 30-day yield across all the portfolios, this is a weighted yield, is of 3.83. Now keep in mind this yield as of today is actually higher because the Fed raised rates here in February, and they're getting ready to raise rates here in March again. So this weighted yield, you'll see it continually go up as the Fed continues to raise rates. Also, the 12-month trailing return is 2.12, which is pretty much in line. And overall, the weighted average maturity of the portfolio is 86 days. Now, that's really good. You want to stay very short. 86 days is a very short rate because as rates change, you want to be able to take advantage of the higher and higher rates. So we're still in that very high interest rate increased environment. The Fed's going to continue to raise rates. We think it's going to get to about 5%, and then we'll see what happens from there. But this is the portfolio's position in a really good spot right now because it can take advantage of those rate increases. Okay. The next page just gives you a graph of what the allocation is. So right now, about 66%, as of January, 66% of your assets were at Florida Prime. You had about 16% in the longer-term portfolio. And then you had some money with Bank of America, that's your daily cash needs, as well as some money with the Fliggett day-to-day fund.
Again, like Dominic said, this is positioned, when you look at this graphically, a lot of liquidity in the portfolio. Cash is king. Cash was king last year as well as the Fed continued to raise rates. So staying short has benefited the portfolio. We'll probably see the third quarter, fourth quarter, the Fed will pause. And if you look at historically a Fed line graph, when they pause, usually follows a cut. So we'll probably start repositioning, reallocating the portfolio later in the year. If we were to come back this time next year, it'll look much differently because of the reallocation into longer-term investments.
Okay, then as far as the investment policy and the current practice, as the clerk mentioned earlier, your investment policy has been in place for 2 years now, and the policy basically meets all the requirements of the Florida statutes, which is good, okay? The clerk is the statutory custodian of the county's assets, and as I mentioned earlier, those assets currently total about $1.8 billion, okay? The clerk and his staff have been actively managing those allocations, and the clerk hired us to assist with those reallocations, especially given what we have seen in the last year in the market. From here, I'll let Ken take
Yeah,
over.
so switching in, when we talk about the policy, the first thing that's important is investment officer considerations. And this is part of the state statutes, is the prudent person rule, statute 218-415-4. I'm not going to read all this to you, but just that middle section, just the clause, if you indulge me. Investments shall be made with judgment and care under circumstances then prevailing, which persons of prudence, discretion, and intelligence exercise in the management of their own affairs. So basically saying that the officers that you have, they're to manage these funds as if they were their own monies, their own funds. Not for speculation, but for investment, considering the probable safety of their capital as well as the expected income to be derived. Now, when I do investment training for a lot of our clients across the state, we talk about the prudent person clause. There's 3 words in here in that clause that I just read that I always like to point out and stick out to them. And what that is not for speculation. So when the investment officers are given that due diligence, that fiduciary responsibility to manage the county's funds, it's not for speculation. There's no guessing, there's no chasing yield, and so it's totally, there's strategies, but it's not for speculation. So, and then the last, that last paragraph, I'll read that last sentence. It said, provided deviation from expectations are reported in a timely manner and appropriate action is taken to control adverse developments. What's an adverse development? 2020. I mean, we went from a little over 2%, and then within less than 2 weeks, the Fed cut the rates to 0. That's an adverse development. So you have to pivot. The county did a great job of pivoting during that time to adjust to those rates. Another one, we could talk about the credit crisis in 07 and 08. That was an adverse development as well. So those are the things when your staff is given that fiduciary responsibility, those are the things that they have to stay and keep in mind, is that prudent person standard. Continuing education. All the staff or whoever's authorized to be investment officers for the county has to take continuing education every year, 8 hours. And it goes over any market conditions, any changes in the laws, any instruments that are of value based on market conditions. Those training folks sit in those class for 8 hours. Sometimes they split it up over 2 days, but that is mandatory that the staff receive this training for their responsibilities. Now, role as a board. What is your role in this? Your role is to provide oversight. Oversight to the policy, oversight to the performance. It says here, board members, executive staff, and outside advisors, those written policies. You are to provide those written policies or give the advice and oversight to those written policies. And for an advisor or your local bank or any broker dealer, they need to understand the organization's investment goals and the risk that the organization is willing to take. And then the review of the performance. So the investment committee that we're going to be recommending, as the clerk recommended in her opening comments, is to have that committee. It's commonly practiced not only in Pinellas, but we work with Nassau County as well. We just did their quarterly performance review with their staff and their committee. And we'll do it either virtually or we do it in person, depending on the need. But the makeup we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then the role of an investment committee. Again, that's going to be one of our recommendations. Again, collaborating with the clerk and her staff. We've talked about the importance of maybe having that committee. The language here in the middle is the National GFOA, that's Government Finance Officers Association. They're kind of the go-to, if you will, for local government investing. And they provide a lot of manuals and training and guidance to a lot of the local governments. This is not the language per se that you're looking at. This gives just an example of the language that you would consider if you were to create this investment committee. And then once that committee is formed, you come to this board and you provide your notes. We met, this was the performance, this is what we decided, this is what say the advisors recommended as well. And we do that on a monthly or quarterly basis. So some of the policy suggestions we made as we reviewed those, as the clerk was mentioning earlier, very, very light. Nothing dramatic, nothing drastic. It's just kind of cleaning it up a little bit. It's very solid. I always say as well that the investment policy is the blueprint to a successful investment program. So I'm going to just kind of fly through some of these. For example, one of the things that we're recommending is delete the verbiage in the Section C, return on investments. It says the portfolio shall be designed with the annual objective of exceeding the average return on the state investment pool. An overnight pool is not a good benchmark, any pool. So you want to look at and identify what's a good benchmark. What should we be outperforming for the portfolio? So we recommended deleting that. We also recommended in the next section there, deleting bankers' acceptances. Can anybody tell me what bankers' acceptances are? Right. In my 27 years, I've never seen a banker's acceptance used. Now, it's legal in several states to use as an alternative to investing, but in 27 years, I've never seen anybody use a banker's acceptance as an individual security, nor have I seen a money market fund or an investment pool use it as part of its portfolio. Simply what a banker's acceptance is, it's very similar to commercial paper. Commercial paper is a promissory note from, say, IBM. You're going to give them the money. They're going to pay your principal and interest back to you on a designated time and interest rate. Same thing with banker's acceptances. You're working with a bank. You're making that payment. They're going to pay you back the principal and interest. And then we also inserted intergovernmental pools authorized to the Florida Local Cooperative Act of 1969. Just inserted that in there. You were already allowed to do pools. We just cleaned that up a little bit. Next page. This is probably I like to say the coolest thing that we put in here is this matrix. This matrix identifies for you all that you're allowed to invest in, but what we put on here is what are the minimums and maximums for the portfolio? What is the minimum rating requirement on these instruments? And this does several things for you. If anybody walks into your office and says, what does the county invest in? You could probably hand them the 12, 15-page policy, but just simply, quickly point them to this page. That sums it up right there. Those are all the things that the policy allows, or the county allows for the investments for the county. This is great for if a broker-dealer, a bank, a firm like ours comes in and says, what can you invest in? You show them this page right here. Auditors, they want to know, are we following the guidelines? Show them right here. This is a quick read, if you will, of what is allowed and what is not allowed. So you'll see what's not allowed, or what we didn't include in here, is bankers' acceptances, because our recommendation was to take it out. So why would we put it on this matrix? So that's one of the things we took out. We also took out collateralized mortgage obligations as well. That's on the next page, but we took that out because it's a very complicated investment. A collateralized mortgage obligation is bundled mortgages sold as one security, okay? And there's a lot of analytics that go into when you're buying those for your portfolio. But this is probably the coolest thing that we inserted. There was one already, we just enhanced it. The next page. So you can see that was the matrix that was in the policy before, and we're just replacing it with the one that was on the prior page. And then at the top, we also inserted, there was a bidding process. So when you're looking at buying CDs for the county or treasuries and agencies, there was a very robust bidding section in there. We just added that a minimum of 3 bids. So when you're going out to the banks, or you're going out to one of your broker dealers and you're looking at treasuries or agencies, get a minimum 3 bids. That's best practices, National GFOA, as I mentioned earlier. And then we, as I mentioned earlier, removed the collateralized mortgage obligations. And then we also recommended extending maturities for treasuries and agencies from 3 years to 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, there might be a slowdown at the end of the year or a pause from the Fed. It might be a time to extend. So that gives you a little more flexibility and opportunity if that is the time to go out and invest in that time frame. The clerk mentioned this earlier. This is going to be the monthly investment report. She wanted to update it. She wanted to utilize it for the county and the county's website. So this is just in draft form right now. But this basically will give you an economic update. It gives you the positions of the portfolio. As Dominic pointed out earlier, the pie chart shows the makeup, and those bar charts show the maturity of the portfolio as well. A lot of counties utilize the same thing. This gives your constituents in the county, if they want to go see what are we investing in, where are our investments, we can just point them right here onto the website. And we're looking at implementing that this coming month, month of March. So again, our suggestions or recommendations, the first one, as we talked about, was forming an investment oversight committee. You can see, as the clerk pointed out, the considerations for the committee or the makeup of the committee. And then the committee will, as she mentioned, annually review the investment policy. That is standard best practices as well. You want to always have that checklist annually. We reviewed the policy. Even if there were no changes to the policy, no statutory changes, you want to check it off. And as I always tell folks too, when you review it annually, make sure that all your vendors that you use for investments, they get a copy of this. And you want them to sign off on it as well. It's covering each other. You'll not have anybody say, well, we didn't know. We didn't know you couldn't invest in that. No, you did because you signed off on our policy. That committee will also make recommended changes to the policy, review quarterly and annual investment reports, and then the strategies that myself and, say, Dominic would come and bring to the table. And I believe that's it.
The investment committee is really a great thing to have. I came to Deep Blue after 8 years with Pasco Schools. I was the finance director and treasurer there, and we had an investment committee. And to me, it was invaluable to have them. It was good to have someone that was there to kind of oversee everything. So it is definitely a good thing to have.
Questions? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Commissioner Ron, would you like to start, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Good morning, Madam Clerk. Thank you, gentlemen, for your great breakdown of where our investments are at. I do have a couple questions. One on the, excuse me, on the investment committee, is that something, maybe this is directed to the county attorney, is that something that the clerk office sets up and we have to do by statute or resolution or ordinance, or how does that investment committee get established?
There is, Commissioner, there's a resolution that would have to take place, and we would establish what that committee would do, who would be members. I have a copy of the Pinellas one I can forward to have a framework as well, if you want to take a look at theirs.
Also, within that, it states that we could have a citizen sitting on that.
You could. The recommendation that Pinellas used was a citizen with government finance experience, someone who's familiar with investments.
Okay. Is it also in your statement earlier that what I have here is our investment policy?
Yes, well, proposed. That's a proposed.
It's proposed. Mm-hmm. So this has never been acted upon?
No, we actually started that a while ago, and then when 2 years ago, we went ahead and went with the financial investors the financial advisors that the county uses for bonds, PRAG, and we asked them, and we went out and helped in the light of the transition that was taking place. Hey, can you draft this? We asked them to draft this, and they did. And then when we brought on, there was some discussion about it then, and it was not put on an agenda. And then when we brought in the financial investment advisors here, they looked at it too, but it was over here ready to talk about or discuss, but it's been in draft like that since 21.
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, what we have right now is we don't have an investment policy.
Commissioner Ron, we do have the older one, and it's inclusive. It's similar to this one, and we are following the statutes, and We haven't been flying without a policy.
Well, no, I understand that, but
Okay.
I mean, there's been a policy out there. This one has not been voted on by the board.
Right, right.
Correct? So this needs to come before the board with the changes
Correct.
that Deep Blue is making for this investment policy.
With Prague. It's Prague drafted it, and then Deep Blue tweaked it a little because they're the investment experts as well, and there it is. That's the finished.
Okay, so what the recommendations they were making just a few minutes ago are in this policy?
Yes, I believe that's the final draft, and
this
that's
is the
one
final
that we
draft?
have.
Sir.
I don't know which way we need to take it from here, but we need to, I guess, approve this policy at some point. So I guess it needs to be reviewed or come before the board, or what needs to happen? I mean, I'm not saying we're flying without wings, but apparently the policy's been changed and there's been effective change for some time now that the board's never voted on.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to address that?
Yes, Mr. Clegg.
So the statute is 2118.415, local government investment policies. They do have to be approved by the board. So until the new one that they are explaining today goes to the board and is approved by the board, the old one remains the effective policy by statute.
All right.
That's correct.
A few more questions. One, in our current policy, much like the state of Florida is doing with our great governor, is divested themselves from ESG and DEI investments. Do the recommendations we have within our, which will be hopefully our soon new investment policy, are we diversing ourselves from all those type of investments and removing those from our portfolio?
I did discuss that with the investment advisors. I'll let them answer that question.
Well, the shortest way to answer that question is the governor. He is the chief investment officer for the state of Florida. So we're following the state statutes that he has implemented and put in place for the state and local governments.
Are we allowed to, I mean, being that the governor is the chief investment officer and he's made these, either through statute or whatever, made these changes, do we need to do anything on a local level to ensure that our investments are not going into those type of investment portfolios, either the ESG or DEI type investments? Or does the state statute govern every county in the state of Florida on how they can manage their investment portfolio? Because I just want to make sure, I understand the governor's coming, I want to make sure that on a local level, we understand that our investments are not going into that. So is that something,
Yeah, we have to, your policy has to follow the state statute. It cannot deviate from that policy. Now, it can be more conservative, but, you know, it cannot be outside what the Florida statutes allow.
so Mr. County Attorney, is that something we would need to do as a resolution or an ordinance or?
Well, I think you could put something in the policy about it if you were so inclined. The policy can be more restrictive than the state. It cannot be less restrictive than the state, is I think what they're trying to say. So if you wanted to add a statement in the policy about that, you could.
All right, thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well, I just want to, we have some new commissioners, so I just want to, understand how we got here without lighting a nuclear bomb. But we had some issues in the past. Has been, communication can be improved between the county commission and the clerk's office. I think we can all agree on that. And we had some issues in the past, and I do appreciate that the clerk has heard essentially the message from the commission that ultimately the commissioner, we are the decision makers here in the end, and we set the policy. I think she's made a good pivot in hiring Deep Blue. I would agree with that. Prior to Deep Blue being hired, I can let the clerk speak to what was happening before that on her own. My understanding is there was a period of time when we didn't have an investment advisor, and we did have a seven-figure loss, which is why she made the pivot, and I'm glad that she did. And if I'm wrong in any of this, please, by all means, when I'm finished, set the record straight. How long is our agreement with Deep Blue is one of my questions. And can you just go over basically the terms of the agreement with Deep Blue?
I didn't bring that with me today, Commissioner.
I mean, the basics of just, if you have that offhand.
I don't, because to be honest, we didn't know we'd have to be here today either. We
Okay.
didn't get the notice of that.
I'm sorry.
But to address your concerns, when you have smaller counties, the return on investment, you have to make sure when you're going out to pay professionals that you don't dig into what you're making on the return on your investment. So our policy, or our portfolio grew exponentially over time. I don't even think we were at $1 billion when I came back to the clerk's office quite. So last year, with the input of war, with the 0 to 0.5 interest rate, with unprecedented in 100 years, and then our portfolio has been at $1 billion or more right now for the last year or two. What we did, the first quarter of last year, our director at the time saw that, along with the investment department, saw that the rates in this one particular fund were going down. They were projected to keep going down. When we moved it, and I asked Deep Blue to analyze it because we knew we'd make it up in 3 months. You don't keep something in a losing proposition, you move it. So when we moved it, you move it carefully, knowing how long, where can we put this, and where will we get it back. The day-to-day fund was performing on an upward projection. So we put it in there, and it was, I think, 1.5 at that time. It's not a loss until you get to the end of your portfolio. We didn't have a losing portfolio. We saved $5 million by making that move, and those funds actually earned $2 million. And the last 6 months of the year, they earned $1 million. So by doing that, we saved that and earned on the investments.
Sure. And just to clarify, I didn't mean to imply that the year was a loss. I was referring to, I believe it was May of last year when we had a 7-figure loss and during that month.
But in the end, we made up for
Correct.
that by
And-
moving it and saving the $5 million. Our portfolio would be significantly less had we done that.
Sure.
And I think there are some who didn't. I'm not saying the counties that they compared us to didn't, but we certainly outperformed other counties in our investment portfolio. This is all something, the policy was something that I've wanted to work on and had a previous director working on it. And you all were busy with a lot of other things going on a couple of years ago. So it was halfway there, or 3/4 of the way there. And rather than, I just paid for it to get it moving. It's your policy. I've always known that. It's the board's policy. You set the policy with it. So that was where we were at and where it kind of stalled out at.
Okay. And just so everyone's on the record, if you ever email me and ask for an agenda item to be placed on a meeting, that will be honored.
Okay.
I mean, anything financial that you need to address the board on.
Okay.
You ask and you'll be on the agenda. You'll be on the meeting agenda. Mr. Clegg, I don't see a reason why this couldn't happen, but straighten me out if it can't. Is there a reason that on the committee, which I think is a good idea, that the entire board couldn't sit on the committee and those meetings be advertised publicly?
Well, I think you could do that. You'd have to treat them as sunshine meetings.
Sure.
If the board's going to
They could be held
sit
during,
on the committee.
they could be held during regular meetings or during workshops. Sometimes we incorporate a port meeting into our regular meetings.
Yeah, I don't know of any reason why you couldn't do that. I don't know if the clerk is aware of anything that I'm not.
I could check. I think it's like any other committee, too, when you have a lot of people. I have to check with other counties and see how they do it, because we can certainly come and do an update. We can certainly come and do an update for the whole board if you want to do that quarterly.
Yeah, that's,
That's
if
up
you
to
don't,
you.
if you don't mind me saying,
Sure.
that is something that we could do, the subcommittee, the investment committee, report to the board. But if you want Dominic and I here every month or every quarter, that's what we'll come and do, and we'll go through the investments with you as well. It's really fun stuff to go through, too.
Right. My thought wasn't monthly, was more quarterly, but,
Yeah.
and we'll hear what the rest of the board has to say. It's just an idea I was sort of proffering for discussion. Next on the board is Commissioner Satcher, and then Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going back to Commissioner Ron's comments, so you mentioned that the governor is the chief investment officer for the state, and so obviously you come into compliance with the guidelines he's putting down, that are passed through, his office and then the legislature as well. But I just wanted to ask, so that I get a better feel for the entire, for the background, what moves did that require you to make that you've made since that law came down or that directive came down?
What moves in the portfolio?
Exactly. So,
Right.
so now if a fund is ESG focused, and that's a big part of their investment strategy, which is, a ingenious but insidious thing that the left has done, where they're taking over people's investments and forcing them to invest into companies that are no longer looking out for the bottom line. They're looking out for the spotted cockroach. But really, I mean, I want to feel for where you come from as far as, okay, once that came down, were there a lot of funds that you had to get out of? Were there a lot of investments that you had made in that direction? Or was that pretty much par for the course for you?
So our typical investments are treasuries and agencies backed by the U.S. government. I mean, and they're pretty plain Jane investments. When we look at, say, commercial paper or corporate notes and bonds, we're looking at the strong companies. A strong company would be, off the top of my head, a Toyota or something like that. But we have. Here's one of the things that we can talk about too. We have an approved list of commercial paper providers. We're out in the market looking at what yield, what kind of service are they providing. If there's someone on the list that we're not going to use, we would definitely let you know that. But we have to follow those state guidelines that the governor's put out in front of us regarding those DEI or the ESG type investments.
Thank you. And then thank you for being here, Madam Clerk. So as far as you mentioned that y'all had been working on this for a while, so how long had that been in the works as far as coming up with the investment strategy?
Well, we didn't come up with the investment strategy. I took a look at it when I first became clerk and talked it over with my then finance director and said, this really should be upgraded, but there were no material big changes that would have impacted a portfolio or anything. It just simply was old and had addendums, and it could have been streamlined, I thought. So that director agreed it's something they wanted to do, something we wanted to do, and he had been wanting to do as well. So we actually started taking a serious look at the draft, I'd say going back 2 years prior to 21. And then we put it in motion. But when everything was happening with the board, I felt like the board wasn't either in a position or didn't need to be worrying about that. I offered to draft it because eventually it's yours to pass and look at anyway. So just to get the ball rolling, I went out and got it going with the finance advisors that the county uses for the bonds. And then Deep Blue, when we brought them on, we went ahead and said, hey, can you look at this too? So they did. And then that way you've got something that's been looked at by two sets of investment professionals for government investments. But it's still out there for you to pass. We did hand it over.
And then remind me, so you said when you initially came on as clerk, what year was that?
That was 2016, well, 2015, I was interim. So I wasn't in a position to do anything about that as interim clerk because under the circumstances that we took over, but it's something that evolves. And as we discussed it with my director of finance, he said that was something, he had told me that was something they were looking at. I said, let's get it done, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Madam Clerk.
Good morning.
Just a couple of comments and questions. I know that several commissioners have a lot more questions right now than I do. I'm glad that we're doing this. I think the committee's a great idea. And I'm just sorry that it was never done before. But in all honesty, we had a board that didn't want to be involved and didn't ask any questions and just went with whatever they were told. And we did it for many years. I remember it. I think it's great when I'm looking at the Investment Oversight Committee, as it's called. I think that's a great idea. But I would say that I think that it's probably something where the committee should get together. And I don't know, I guess quarterly would be enough. And I know that's what you're recommending. But I do think that every quarter that someone, whether it be the clerk, whether it be one of you, or our commissioner that we designate to be on this committee, which I think is a great idea, by the way, this entire board needs to have an update as to what is happening. We need to see where the investments are on a quarterly basis. But that being said, the economy right now is so volatile. How often do you look at these investments? Because I don't know that quarterly is really going to be enough right now with the track that the county's taking. What are your thoughts on that? Do you look at them like once a week or every day?
From our side, we look at them every day.
Yeah.
It is about day trading, I think.
We have a portfolio management team and strategists and people that are looking at the market every day, every hour, every minute. From our side, we're the investment advisors. That's what we do.
It's a room full of Bloomberg machines.
Okay, well, I didn't hear that earlier, and
Yeah.
I was like,
No.
with the country, I'm sorry, with the economy and going the way it is right now, it's very concerning because of inflation. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, we were talking about this from your side, quarterly reporting to y'all, but from our side, it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
daily thing.
No,
It's every day.
It's every.
I wouldn't like your job, so you know. Just don't, no. I like you coming and just talking to us quarterly. It's much easier. I don't have a problem really with the makeup of the committee myself. I think it'll be interesting to see what the other commissioners think. Only because I think it's good that somebody will come back quarterly from the committee and meet with all of us. Regarding the role of the board, I think it is, I'm glad that you brought forth a new policy because I knew ours had expired
Oh, it
and
didn't.
we had never,
It didn't expire.
it's not expired?
No.
Oh, I thought it was.
Oh, no, no.
The-
Or is that the travel policy?
You're thinking
can't
of another
keep up right now.
policy, I think. You're
I'm
thinking
sorry?
of something else. I think that's something else,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
well, it seems like we've got a lot that have expired that's never come back, so we're looking at that. At any rate, I think it's great that we look to update it. I think it's great to hear that you're going to follow the governor's guidelines, because he certainly is who we're following, for sure. So anyway, I'll wait and hear from the other commissioners, but so far, I'd say this is a great idea.
Can I add something, Commissioner?
Yes.
To that, when you were talking, it dawned on me there too, and maybe your attorney can weigh in on this. Having 7 at once, I'm just adding it as a cautionary thing because you don't want to get into a situation where you're all, how do I want to put it? You want to oversee the investment policy, but you're going to walk a fine line between having to be required to take those 8 hours of investment plan, all that stuff. So that's probably another reason Pinellas put one commissioner on that committee. I don't know. I'd have to ask them. I mean, I know Sunshine was the other reason.
Well, for me, it wasn't because of sunshine, and it wasn't the 8-hour training or any of that. It was more of, I think any local government today has to be careful with things like that because of cyber and so forth. So
Yes.
that's why I mentioned it.
Yes, and I think those quarterly meetings help with that understanding of what Commissioner Van Ostenbridge was talking about. There's a big difference between sitting down and looking at it and saying, look, if we move this money here, it's temporary, we will make that up in 3 months. And when we do, I think it's easier when you're discussing it and seeing it happen in real time and discussing that because that was 0 to 0.5% were the interest rates we were working off of when everything went bad a year ago this month. So I think that helps too with communication and understanding.
And as I said, it's concerning to me because the more we talk about it, the more others hear it, and it could cause problems for us in other ways that we're not even thinking about right now. So that's why my main concern. I don't want to be on the committee at all. I've got as much going on in my little commissioner world that I can take. I don't need another committee. Besides, I'm not the most experienced that we have on this board with things like that. So anyway, I'd love to hear from other commissioners.
Thank you, ma'am. And yet you lost me at 8 hours of training.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, but perhaps Commissioner Bearden and Commissioner Ron can arm wrestle over who will serve on the committee. Yeah. Loser has to serve on the committee, by the way. I don't have anyone else on the board at this time. Any other commissioners like to speak? Yes, sir. Commissioner Satcher. And then Commissioner Ron.
So one more follow-up. So Madam Clerk, as far as your role, could you just give us an overview, not just in investment, but as far as your role as the clerk, the things that you do and take on the different things that you oversee here in the county?
Thank you, Commissioner Satcher, for that. What we have, the board has the budget side. You decide how to spend the money, and you decide how to spend it, and you take a vote on that. And then the clerk's role by constitution is there to look at the expenditures. We have to have backup for everything that the expenditures have. And a lot of times that involves calling over and asking a lot of questions, which is, that's the process that goes back and forth between the finance people here and procurement people. You have your own procurement. You have your own, like I said, procurement that handles your decisions on how to spend the money. There are levels, and there's policy out there for the board also, certain levels of expenditures that require particular approvals. And then, of course, we have the audit section. We do the pre-audits on payments. We have an accounts payable that does pre-audits. Then we also have our audit department, and they conduct the audits and investigations for the county. And they do the audits on, every year they set out an audit plan. And we just sent out in January to the board and the then administrator for anything you'd like us to look at as we plan our audit plan for the next year. Some are announced audits, the announced audits, and then some we do, for example, a cash count, a pop-up cash count we'll do wherever there's cash being taken in the county. These are normal, regular things. Of course, you can't get through everything 100%, and no one does. And in 1 year or even 5, I know at one point it was talked about that 5-year was a standard, but there is no industry standard for that. Audits are to give assurances that things are happening. You have a level of confidence and assurance that things are happening according to your policy. We audit to your policy on a lot of things that we audit for the county. It's that you can lean on us, if you will, and say, hey, our independent clerk looked at this, our comptroller looked at this, and it passed the test, and here's the report that says so. And we advise you of that. We've also done consulting work in the past for the county when they want to look at a process, and they've brought us in for that. The county is growing, so our responsibilities as far as volume are growing, not in responsibility. We do the asset management for the county. Everything that has an asset tag, we go out and inventory. That's part of our accounting department. We manage the grants on our side. There's a grant management that takes place on your side, but we also make sure the grants are complied with. There's probably over 300 grants or more, numerous grants, so those are randomly tested as well. And they're tested by the external auditors. We provide hours to the external auditors to save money as well as that goes. We have the accounting department. We're responsible for the financial reporting to put out the ACFR, the annual comprehensive financial report, which will be sent for the final upload here in a few weeks. And we are responsible for that. We are responsible for the port. We're the only clerk with a port reporting requirement as well. And we look at their expenditures just as you do, and they have policies, your policies as the Port Authority when you switch hats. We look at those as well. And we also have board accounting, the board accounting side. Obviously, they manage the funds, and we can see what's allocated to where, and we look at that. But your side is the budget side, managing the budget. We deal with the bank. We go through and analyze the payments. And sometimes you'll have certain particular batches of payments where you take the samples, random sampling is what it's called in the audit world, and you'll take a sampling of that, and they test to that. Some of them are looked at all the time. We have the travel that we get out as well, the travel checks. What we'd like to do is work with the county and come over, and we can the people, for your aides, for example, are right off the top of my head, is what I think of for travel. We could come over so that it lessens the need for phone calls and questions back and forth, and we could help them see what we need, or any of your staff what we need for particular payments, and that would help too, I think, with questions and such. And we also have the land records that we keep track of for the board minutes. This is all board side. There's, of course, the court aspect of what we do.
So as far as the setup with what you do for the board side, and then, you mentioned what you do for the state. So is that two separate? You mentioned that we oversee the budget, the clerk's budget. So is that 100% of your budget, or is that a portion of? Does some come from the state? How does that work?
Our court side, are you talking about our court side? That would be the state side.
Okay.
The state side of our budget is the court side. And there are a lot of rules and regulations. For example, some funds have $1 and this goes to this trust fund, and this can only be used for technology. The paths can't cross between court and county funding. That goes back to Article 5, which was passed in 2009. And it used to be we were funded through the county, but they did away with that with a constitutional amendment back in 2009. So now we go to the state legislature for our court funding. That's funneled through our Clerk of Court Operating Corporation through the state of Florida. The legislature decides what we will get in funding. It goes there, and then we have a whole executive committee who divides that up among the clerks in the state of Florida. That's the court side of the office. The board side of the office comes from the county.
Okay. And then I believe I've heard you mention before, I don't remember the exact number. I just remember it's a lot as far as how many different duties you perform.
Over 1,000 statutory.
Over 1,000 statutory duties that you perform. Okay.
Yes.
So a lot going on in a lot of different directions, right?
Well, it's
a lot of
organized.
responsibility,
It's
but-
organized, yes, but it's all statutory. It's all the law-driven. Even the money is law-driven. There are internal controls too, and this is something that I know I don't want to get off topic of the work session, but there's internal controls too that we have to have. You don't have one person handling all the way through to an end of a task. You wouldn't, for example, have the same person taking in a money, preparing a deposit, and then going all the way through. You have to have different eyes on something where it might take a private business, and maybe, they would have internal controls, hopefully, but it might be quicker. But in government, it's, the funds, public funds we're looking at. So you have a segregation of duties that's required under the accounting standards. So you go by those standards, and that's to prevent fraud, to give that level of protection.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Ron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Clerk, gentlemen, thank you for being here today. What I'd like to do is there's two things I'd like to see if we can get done. One is do a resolution to support the governor in his diversification of investments out of ESG and DEI type of investments and funds. See if we can put some teeth in that for our investment program. So I don't know how we write that up, if that's to be a resolution or an ordinance. But I would like to, the second thing I would like to do is, I don't know if we need a motion to establish the investment committee. Is that?
So why don't we handle these one at a time? We can't
Okay.
obviously take action in a workshop, but let me just try to get a consensus here and say, does anyone take issue with Commissioner Ron working with the county attorney's office to bring forward a resolution supporting the governor's investment strategies and applying those to the county? Okay, so we don't have anyone objecting to that, so we can take that as a consensus. And then, sir, what was your second one again? I'm
Well, I
sorry.
mean, the clerk's brought before us today to establish an investment oversight committee. And I don't know if that has to be done by, at a board meeting or
It
whatever.
does.
But I think that what we need to do is that establish this committee, oversight committee, review the changes in what's going on with the updated investment policy, then bring that before the board, after that committee's reviewed it, to vote on and make it our official policy.
So does anyone, first of all, take issue with Commissioner Ron working with the clerk and the county attorney's office to establish an investment advisory committee and bringing that to the board for a formal vote? Okay, I think you have the okay to do that as well. And then once you have your committee, then you can bring us the investment policy
Okay.
through the committee.
So the committee can be automatically established?
You need to work with the county attorney's
Okay.
office, bring that to the board for, and the clerk, and bring it to
Okay.
to the board
All
for
right.
a vote.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, thank you. Do we have anyone else on the board to speak at this time? Okay, seeing no one, Mr. County Attorney, do you have any thoughts before we move on?
No, sir, I'm comfortable with where the board wants to go.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think this was a good discussion, and
I
I
do
look
too.
forward to moving forward with this, and I can't wait for you and everyone else to see the monthly reports when they are there.
Sure. Yeah, a little rough water, but I appreciate you bringing this to us and sort of hearing the board's concerns and addressing them. So thank you very much. All right, it's 9:55. Libraries are next. Do you want to take a quick 5, and we'll transition to the next topic? All right, we're in recess for 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. We are continuing our workshop this morning of the Board of County Commissioners. We just finished discussing clerk investment policy, and now we are moving on to a discussion on libraries. So it's 10:01, and I will turn things over to Mrs. Parrott, who runs our library system. Ma'am?
All right, can you hear me? All right, very good. Good morning. Thank you all for having me here today. Good morning, Commissioners, Attorney, Mr. Washington. Thank you. All right, so my name is Tammy Parrott. I'm the Library Services Manager for the county. And I will spend a little time talking to you today about library operations and just all things that happen behind the scenes with the library. I know that there's going to be questions as we go. I'd be glad to stop and answer questions at any time, but we also have time built in at the end. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. This is our existing mission and vision statements. They have been in place since approximately 2017. They were in place when I began working with the county. Right now, we are in the midst of beginning community conversations for the direction the community would like the library to go. We had a series of town hall meetings at all of our locations in September, and we plan on having another round next September. The establishment of free library services. This slide is relevant because it does talk about the Florida statutes that does cover library services and the state archives. This chapter speaks also to the state library. It gets to the public library service at about section 13 or so. The Manatee County Comprehensive Plan, Goal 7.2, also speaks to library services. Many of you have seen this before. It was a part of our commissioner briefing packet, but here's a summary of our services, programs and classes, materials for entertainment, information, and education, classes and programming for personal enrichment, and community spaces. Some of the questions that we receive about how the library is used does revolve around statistics and analytics. So I wanted to give you a few numbers and also give you a snapshot of the Power BI dashboard that we have. Here we have a few numbers. We have a large number of Wi-Fi sessions. This covers one fiscal year. Reference questions. This is a combination of in-person and online. And our programming, this is largely in person. We're not doing much virtual programming right now, but we do have the technology to do that as needed. But this is a great number because it does show that we do have a large number of relevant programming with a high number of attendance. This next number is study room use. We have study rooms in all of our locations currently, except for the Little Discovery Center. And over the last fiscal year, nearly 12,000 hours worth of use. And our circulation number, 1.2 million items were circulated over a fiscal year, and that does include physical and digital. This next number shows that nearly 1 million people a year walk into our buildings. This is the Power BI dashboard that is part of the administrative dashboard. This is just a snapshot from a few days ago. And I'm not sure if you can see here, it does show that we were down just a little bit over January for usage. That is because we had rolling closures because we were putting RFID tags in all of our physical collections. So one at a time, we had a branch closed for 3 days at a time. So that did bring us down a little bit. But there's another number that I know you can't see in your handouts, and it's actually a little hard to see here, but we will include the link in the memo afterwards. But in September, when we expanded our hours, we saw an increase in library usage from August 2022 to September 22, an increase of 34%. Now, September 21 to September 2022, we saw an increase of 66%. And I do believe that that is a combination, one, of more comfort coming out in public. We did see more and more people coming in the building. But I also think a big increase was due to the fact that we expanded our hours. The hours had been 40 hours a week at all locations, and we were not open on Monday. We're still not open on Sundays. That's not really something I have on my plan for the future or that Mr. Washington and I have talked about. Many library systems are, but I don't know that that is where we need to go. But we expanded from 40 hours a week to 62 hours a week. We are now open 9 o'clock to 8 o'clock, Monday through Thursday, and 9 to 6, Friday and Saturday. It's a lot easier for people to remember we're open, especially when they have a million different things going on. Can I go to the library today? I don't know. Are we open? Now, many of you know individual librarians, and you enjoy them and have worked with them personally and professionally. But I want to tell you a little bit about the way we're internally organized, just so you have an understanding of how we operate. We have 7 locations. All of our administrative and centralized work is handled at the central library. Every other location is considered a branch library because it can't operate independently. But as far as the public is concerned, every location is their library, and it's the best library in the world. I mean, that's something we hear every day. We do have internal teams. Each one of these internal teams, we call them departments, but I'm use the word teams here to avoid confusion because we do have departments at the county level. Our circulation team handles procedures and training. We have a specialized software that is used for circulating materials, and you'll see the public expression of that as our public catalog. So they provide all the training on that. And they also take care of the daily delivery that we have to all of our locations. We have an information services team that provides deep research for county staff and also takes care of our genealogy and our local history collection and also provides all reference services. We have a programming department that supports staff at all levels by providing oversight and taking care of our public programming catalog. Technical Services handles many functions. It's probably the worst named department in library land because really there's not a lot of technical when it comes to this. What they do manage our integrated library system, which is technology, but they work with IT to implement that. But they take care of interlibrary loan, cataloging, purchasing, and essentially shelf readiness, making sure that all the stickers are there, making sure that people can find them. It's about discovery of services, discovery of materials. And then our final group is Youth Services. They are the centralized youth services team. We do have youth services librarians at all of our locations, and they work very closely to bring our literacy-based programming, pre-literacy programming, run our summer reading program, and our new program that we just rolled out this month of 1,000 books before kindergarten. The library administrative team, a large portion, which is here today, consists of myself, Lynn, and we have a marketing specialist. We have an HR liaison, administrative services coordinator that helps us when we are hiring and works with HR through the entire HR process and training. We have a fiscal analyst that takes care of the day-to-day fiscal needs of the library. We have an outreach and community engagement librarian because we felt that we needed to expand our services to homebound patrons. So we have books by mail. We're also looking at expanding books by mail and home delivery. And finally, we have an administrative specialist to make sure we all know where we are. And she does much more than that. This is the total positions allocated to the library system. Not all of them are filled right now. We have 40 librarians with master's degree from American Library Association accredited university. We have 46 full-time library assistants and 28 part-time library assistants. That's a total of 112 staff, 102.9 FTEs. We're fortunate to have, many supporting organizations. We're supported by the Library Foundation, the Friends of the Library, and I'm grouping the Friends groups here together. Each location actually has a Friends group, and they're very active, and they support their individual locations. We have a Library Advisory Board, and we're also supported by the Florida State Library. I'm going to unpack these a little bit just so you understand who they are. The Library Foundation was formed exclusively to support the Manatee County Public Library System. That's their whole reason for being. They contribute annually to us, and over the last 3 years, they've provided about $265,000 worth of funding. The Friends of the Library, again, each location has their own independent group, and they are truly independent. They are each a 501c3. They support us, but we do not provide direction to us, and they do not provide direction to us. So they can fund our programming, but they don't direct our programming, if that makes sense. And then, of course, we have our Library Advisory Board. It's a 5-member advisory board. Each member is appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, and we have a liaison, Commissioner Ballard. And then our Florida State Library, which is a division of the Florida Department of State, and provides training and continuing education for our staff. And also, they provide electronic resources that any library in the state can offer to their constituents. I want to tell you a little bit about librarianship and how Lynn and I ended up being who we are professionally. The professional organizations that are relevant here are the American Library Association, the Public Library Association, the Florida Library Association, and the Tampa Bay Library Consortium. The Library Bill of Rights is something that all libraries work with, and what it boils down to is it focuses on removing barriers to access. And as library services have expanded over the years and electronic resources have become more relevant, it also removes barriers to accessing the internet and electronic resources. And our commitment to the community is that as a profession, we are committed to offering differing views that represent everyone in the community. We curate materials without favoring or endorsing any of those views. Our funding. So our primary funding is from you all. We have a large operating budget. The Library Foundation, Friends, state aid from the Florida Department of State, and we also receive gifts and grants. And here's a table over the last 3 years of what our funding picture has been like. The asterisk next to the state aid to libraries is the estimated amount we'll be receiving this year. We've not received it yet. Grants and gifts in fiscal year 22, those were 2 different grants that we received. We received a $50,000 grant from the state library that was divided between 2 buckets. It was funding for children's materials and then augmenting our ebook collection. In FY23, it was the $215,000 that we talked about at the last Board of County Commissioners meeting. All right, we do operate, we have some basic operations and policies. Some policies don't rise to the level of coming to the Board of County Commissioners for approval, but there are many that do. And we do operate as one library with many locations with even application and use of our operations and policies and procedures. I already spoke to the hours. We have unified hours across the board. We found that people really, really enjoy knowing when their library is going to be open and not being confused and walking up and shaking the door because they're not sure when we're going to be open. We have a policy for room use, circulation, conduct, display, and collection development and management. Things that we don't do, and this is something that can be a little bit confusing for people because sometimes they come into the library and they think we do everything. They think we're smart people and we can handle it all. But what we don't do is we don't give tax advice. We don't give medical advice, which you shouldn't think you'd have to say in a public meeting, but sometimes people do want medical advice from us. We don't fill out applications for people. We help them navigate websites because there is a liability there for staff, for the library, and for the county, so we don't do that. We don't provide answers to homework. We don't give legal advice. We're not attorneys. And we don't provide other non-library professional services. And one of the ones that stands out to me is copy editing. More than once, people have come to us and say, hey, can you read my manuscript? I'd really like some help on this. So that generally then we show them how to find professional help of that kind. So to unpack the policies and operations a little bit, again, we have hours. Here, let me see. That is uniform. Room use. The room use policy, that is probably 2.5 years old now. We changed our room use policy just a little bit, but what it boils down to is that our big meeting rooms are primarily for the use of the library and the county. And then we operate programs and classes there for the public. And then if there is open space on the calendar, anyone in the public can book those rooms. If you are an established 501c3 within the county, it's open to you for free. And other groups can rent the rooms for $25 an hour for a small room or $50 an hour for a large room. We have a conduct policy that what boils down to not interfering with another person's use of the library system. And then our circulation policy covers different kinds of library cards, how long things can be borrowed, and fees. I was going to start to say fines, but we don't have fines. Fees for missing materials, lost materials, damaged materials. An important thing that I did want to bring up is in our circulation policy, we do have a library registration form. This isn't a very good picture. But if you can see right here, this is the part that a parent would sign when a child gets a library card. And you may be able to see that in your handout. But the important thing to note is that a parent has an option on the library card to ask to restrict materials, R-rated materials, explicit materials for their child. So that's a choice the parent makes when they're signing up for a library card. And any child 18 and under, does have to have a parent sign for their library card. The next two items, I'm grouping these together because so many of the same principles apply to displays, collection development, and management. Our guiding principles here are many viewpoints, a well-rounded collection, one collection with many access points. We don't expect each library to have a full collection of any particular author or any particular subject. There's just not enough room. But we do have a wonderful delivery system. We move items between branches daily. So, and then another important feature to speak to is that it's community-driven. It's based on who we have in the community and also requests from the community. I wanted to share with you how we divide our budget. You may be able to see this in your handout. But this is largely based on usage statistics. We do evaluate this every year to see if we need to up the percentage that we put towards children's collection, lower the percentage for fiction, or put more money toward periodicals, newspapers. So we evaluate this annually. Maintaining the collection. We centralize our collection purchases. There are different ways you can do this. Lynn and I have both worked in library systems where we were responsible for individualized budgets for each location. We have a centralized system because we feel like it is a little bit more streamlined and is a better use of funds. So we buy books all year long, and we need to make room on the shelf. So that's why what we call in library land is weeding and deselection of materials. And mostly that is outdated, underutilized, or damaged materials. We will weed damaged materials all day long because we do feel that the library users deserve a fresh copy of a book when they come in the library. And we do, again, access other sources through interlibrary loan. We will borrow materials from other library systems. And we do also have what we call a virtual branch, which is our ebook and e-audiobook platforms. Here's some of the points that we use when making selection for the materials. It needs to be related to the existing collection. A good example would be making sure we have all the books in a series. That's a simple thing, but it's a good example. Current usefulness or permanent value, an example would be having a nice clean copy of Moby Dick on the shelf all the time. A document of the times. The Warren Commission report would be a good example. We should always have a copy of that on the shelf. Popular and community-based demand. So if there is that book that every book club is reading, we need to have a lot of copies of that book. Relative importance in comparison with other items. A good example of this is we need to always have Stephen Hawking on the shelf for popular physics readings, which there is such a thing. I'm not a member, but that is something that happens. High standards of content, format, and binding. And what I mean by that is truly a strong binding that's going to hold up, no misspellings, and it's a simple thing, but think about a book you may have opened at some point, and it's bound so closely you have a hard time reading the words that are in the gutter. So we need to look at those kind of things when we buy the materials. And we do utilize reviews, bestseller lists, and award lists. Here's most of our vendors that we use, and they are listed in order of how much we utilize them. Most of our collection development budget is through Baker & Taylor. Baker & Taylor provides materials to all libraries, I think, across the country and probably a good part of the world. Then the next two are, again, ebooks. The two after that are large print. And Blackstone provides audiobooks, and Amazon, we use Amazon. It's not my favorite because they're not, they're just standard use materials. They'll tend to fall apart, but sometimes that's the only place you can get a book. So this is an example of what it looks like when we go into Baker & Taylor to buy a book. This is just a screenshot of where the crawdads sing. And you can see here that we look at a lot of items here, or a lot of information here. We'll look at who the audience is. There's different tabs there. We have a lot of detail about where it would be cataloged, who the primary audience is. If there's an additional content, something we see in travel books is sometimes there'll be additional content for maps or CDs. Alternative formats, that may mean that the book is available in Spanish or French, something that we may want to think about collecting. Reviews, we spend a lot of time looking at reviews, and I'll show you that in the next couple slides. And then sometimes we have an opportunity to read the introduction. And then we also look at demand. Is it a popular item? Are a lot of libraries buying it? Did it have a lot of pre-publication buzz, so everyone bought a lot of copies, and then there's nothing afterward? That means there was a lot of buzz, but no one really wanted to read it. So we take all of that into account as we decide where to spend the collection development funds that we have. This is an example of a children's book, Snail and Worm. Now, this one you can see, maybe you can't see, but it's for grades 1 and 2, age roughly 7 to 6. And the book is $6.99. Now, that's not the full price. We do receive a discount, maybe about 10%. But what we'll do is we'll look at a couple of reviews. Now, this one says that this is an appealing, easy reader that is a must-have for most collections. We'll look at these reviews because often they will let us know, is this a book that needs to be in most libraries? Or is it a book that you can, if you have extra collection development funds, go ahead and give this a try. But here we have a review that says, yeah, it's just okay. So depending on the price of the book, we'll make decisions that way. So that's what we do every day when we get in there to select books. So that's all the different information that we're looking at. As we're talking about collection development, policies, and operations, I did want to make sure that this form was highlighted for everyone. Every collection development policy that any library in the country uses, there is a process for requesting reconsideration for materials or resources. This is a form that can be filled out by any member of the community and any library card holder who would like us to take another look at an item to see if it really does belong in the collection. And we do have a 30-day process for that. If someone does want us to review material, reconsider where it is, Lynn and I would review it. We'd consult with Mr. Washington. We would also consult with maybe the subject expert. If it was youth materials, we consult with our youth librarians. And then we would return a verdict within 30 days. If the person who is requesting reconsideration is not quite happy with our findings, they can then take it to the Library Advisory Board. So again, something for everyone. I know that you all are probably even more well-versed in demographics than I am, but I wanted to take a brief look. I'm comparing here the United States, Florida, and Manatee County. We're actually a pretty good snapshot of the United States. We're maybe not as young as other parts of the country, and maybe a little bit more well-to-do, but altogether, we're very much alike. And a day in the life of a frontline library staff member. This is something, because many people think, oh my gosh, I'd love to work in a library because I'd love to read all day. I was talking to Lee about my hobbies the other day, and he was really surprised that I don't read that much anymore. We work on the service desk. Each staff member spends at least half their day sitting on a desk talking to the public. And all of the staff love that. That's really what they're there for, is to work with the public. We offer tech support. We provide reader's advisory. And reader's advisory, that's a little bit of library language, but that would example if, I'm going to pick on Lee here. Let's say Lee likes to read science fiction, but he wants to move into Westerns. So I'd find out what he likes about science fiction, and then I'd find the right Western to help him. We handle materials. We check in materials, we shelve materials, we check for damage, we do all of that good stuff. FAQs, we're walking FAQs. People ask us questions all day long. We provide programming, cleaning, and facilities management. Property management does an amazing job. And, but sometimes things need to happen more quickly. So if there's some mess right there in the path, sometimes the librarian does have to go clean it up. The joke is we didn't learn that in library school, but we did learn it when we were growing up. So everyone has taken care of those items. We also make sure the newspapers are out. We make sure that it's a comfortable third space for the community. So the libraries are one place where people do not have to buy coffee, buy a sandwich, or do anything like that. They just come in and read the newspaper. We're also out in the community, providing services, providing story times, visiting people in nursing homes, providing collections. And finally, a recent study that I read is that librarians are trusted by 93% of the community. And I think that's why we are the FAQs, because they do come to us because we're easy to ask questions. And that's a good segue, because I thank you for having me here today, and now I'm ready to ask your questions, answer your questions.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So I pulled a Commissioner Whitmore and I put myself on the board as soon as you started talking.
That's what we were over here laughing about.
It was her like go-to move as soon as Commissioner Baugh was chair before I was, so she knows as soon as the presenter started talking, she would push the button and put herself on. And then, of course, if she changed her mind, she'd just take herself off. But otherwise, she was always the first one up. It was kind of a slick move. Anyway. So you were cruising along. How long have you been with us? Just curious. With the
I've been
county.
here for, I've been with the county for almost 3.5 years.
Okay.
I've been in this position for a little over a year.
Okay. And you find yourself in the position at a time when libraries have been sort of thrust to the front of sort of social issues going on in this country.
Yes, sir.
So we'll be we want to have a respectful, professional conversation. I know everybody has, sort of strong passions regarding this. I'm actually not going to start with content. I have some philosophical, and I mean this with, of course, all due respect. I just want a good conversation because I have some philosophical questions about libraries, and I do want your input on where libraries are going, right? So I've looked up the history of libraries, and essentially libraries were created at a time. The first library was in Macedonia. I mean, it's like 5,000 years ago. But libraries have, when I looked it up, when written word started, that was where the origin of it was, and they started libraries around that time. So my question is, the history of libraries essentially is to provide educational opportunities. Would you agree with that, essentially, that they've always been education-based, and it's to create an opportunity and a place for people to go to learn who otherwise would not have access to literature? Does that sound, generally speaking, correct? You're probably going to give me the exact definition, like straight out of the book, recited verbatim.
I won't do that to you.
Okay.
But yes, I would agree with you. I would also say that it has expanded to reading for enjoyment, but I think that reading for enjoyment also speaks to literacy. If reading is a drag, you're really not going to do it. So we do also try and focus on reading for fun, making sure you do enjoy it, and digital literacy, electronic literacy.
Right, and I would totally agree with that. And that's where I'm going is, what is the, we know covering the history of libraries, what is the future of libraries, and would you consider our library system to be modernized? I get, because I bring these topics up, people think I'm anti-library, and I'm not. I want to see our library system modernized, and I want to see it utilized to the maximum potential. I want to see it, I want to see it active in the community to its maximum potential. That's what I want to see, and I want to maximize access to it. We have things, we have digital content, obviously, and I also want to see the library efficient, which brings me to digital content as well. Obviously, I'm the only one who voted against the Lakewood Ranch Library, and it's not that I didn't think they should have one. I proposed other options and ideas. My concern was the size of it and the scope of it. And the largest library, to be fair, the largest library in the county is in my district. And, I take issue with the size and scope of it as well. And even the location, we could get into that too. But my question is, and it maybe it's more of a board discussion, but should we do more to modernize our library? Should we have a stronger focus on digital? Schools, for instance, have media centers. And should we be gearing ourselves more towards a media center than a large 50,000 square foot library? And, our investment in content, I assume, is, for the most part, is going to be like physical hard copy books. And if I'm, okay. And when you were going through your slides, I noticed that 15% between children and teens, the total investment in library content, only 15% of that goes towards children and teens. And I'm not saying adults should not continue learning throughout their life, but the vast majority of them have the ability to access the internet and to access digital content. And I understand if they don't want to, people creatures of habit. I'm a creature of habit, right? We prefer what we've always done. My dad spends an exorbitant amount of money having the Bradenton Herald delivered to his home because he likes to sit down in the morning with his coffee and open up physically the newspaper. It drives me crazy, and I'm like, Dad, I read that like 3 days ago online. You're just getting around to it. Doesn't matter. It's the process every morning. It's what gets him going in the morning. Fine. And that's okay. But my question then becomes, this is all like philosophical questions for the board, should then that be free? Because that is the additional cost, right? And we're getting to the question of user fees. And I push back on user fees at times, but I know that's the direction that not just this board or this county, but counties all over the state and the country are going in that direction of user fees. It's user fees for boat ramps, which I know are coming. It's user fees for beach parking, which I know is coming. We're going to discuss, user fees for utilities soon enough. So I know that user fees are coming. And so my question is if digital is available at a much lower cost versus, right, the actual physical hard copy content, should we start to look at reducing the amount of hard copy that we have, reducing the amount of square footage that we have accessible in the libraries, and going more digital, modernizing ourselves where we can. And I really think we should address the locations of our libraries as well. There are 9 schools in Manatee County where the overall school grade the reading score is failing. Okay, all of them are elementaries. None of them has, with the exception of Ballard, none of them has a library in their district. So this is something we should look at. Where are the libraries? Is the library system actually serving people who do not have access to information and to educational materials? And I see our Library Board of Trustees liaison waving her card to speak. But so that's a question I think we should ask ourselves. And I'm willing to use my district as the example. There are 2 libraries in my district. One is downtown Bradenton on the riverfront, and the other is located on Anna Maria Island. Okay, there are areas of my district, if you go south of where we are right now, this building's in my district, if you go south of here into District 3, that is an area where you're going to find kids who do not have access to learning materials, right? But there's not a library down there. The library is on the riverfront in Anna Maria Island. And while obviously there's a huge area in Lakewood Ranch that didn't have a library at all, so we needed some sort of presence out there, yes. But then we built, and it's been decided, so I'm not arguing it, but we have decided to build this massive library, this massive investment in our library system. And it's been how many years since we built a new library, and that's where we chose to build this massive library. Meanwhile, you have areas of town where, according to, our head of libraries, the history of libraries, the purpose is to have educational material available to those who otherwise wouldn't have it. But yet we're not building libraries or investing in libraries in those areas in our community. And so when I talk about modernization of libraries, it's not that I want to get rid of libraries or in the library system. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. I want to modernize it. I want it to be more digital. If you insist on, like my dad, he has to pay a premium because he wants that hard copy Bradenton Herald. So he pays like 10 times more than I do for his Bradenton Herald and gets the information 3 days later, his choice, whatever. We'll discuss it at Thanksgiving. But with libraries, should you then, if you make the choice that I want the hard copy, right, this costs the library system more money, so be it. This is what I want because I like it and I've always done it. I respect that. But then should there be a user fee involved if that's what you're insisting upon, as to where if you're using it digitally, it's free, to encourage people to do it digitally and to make the library system more efficient? And should we look at smaller libraries, internet-based or technology-based media centers in areas of this town and this county where those services are needed by that population and they're not existent? Those are my questions for the board. Commissioner Ballard.
So I have a couple of things to mention on those fronts. One, I think that if you look at our digital collection and what we're actually able to do digitally, it's huge. We have a huge digital collection. Number two, I spoke with Ms. Parrott on this, and unfortunately, the digital collection is actually more expensive for the library.
Digital collections are more expensive.
You nodded your head when I said physical content is more expensive.
No, I'm nodding because I was listening and
Okay.
and trying to take note. But I will give a solid example that Commissioner Ballard and I spoke to. I had an example of a paperback book that cost $17, $18, and I also bought it in ebook. And the ebook, I don't have it with me, but I'm going to say it was $85.
Question,
And
are you only able to put out one copy? Once you have that ebook, are you limited? Is that $85 only usable to one person at a time?
yes, it is. And
Which is
depending on
insane.
licenses, it may expire in 2 years.
Which is insane. Okay.
Right.
Go ahead.
So,
ma'am.
so that problem is obviously going to get in the way of the user fee model. I personally am really against user fees for libraries. I'm a library nerd. I have I have hundreds of books at home. I utilize the library regularly with my kids, on my own. So I'm very, very pleased to be a part of the board and have some impact on these issues. The other thing that I wanted to address is the idea of shrinking collections, getting more access into areas of the county where people really need it. I agree with that. Not shrinking the collections, but helping kids and people who really need that library access, helping them to get it in the best way possible. So I want everybody to think back to an idea that we probably all had in our childhoods, but that I think but that can be modernized and actually really helpful and cost effective for today, and that's bringing back bookmobiles. I just read that. So I think that's something that we can do where they can travel out, they can be in these areas of the county, they can be on a set schedule so that the kids who need to access them can access them. It can be a Wi-Fi hub. It can be all of those things for the kids who really need it, and we're able to do that in a way that is going to be really cost effective. So that is something that gets me really excited, and I'm hopeful that other board members would be excited about that as well. I love the homebound access, the mailing, because there are some of our older residents who can't get out to the library, who want to read, who need to read. And they're not getting, they don't have Hoopla. They're not accessing this stuff digitally, so they need that access. The expanded hours, that is huge. I spent 40 to 50 hours a week in the library when I was studying for the bar exam, just because it was my way of separating myself from any kind of pressures or distractions at home, so that it was really a place of refuge for me. So I think that community space is still so important, and as we go more and more digital, I think that physical space is just as important today for those reasons. I have a lot of other issues I want to address, but that was just kind of in response to Commissioner Van Ostenbridge. So I'll come back to my other stuff later.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't believe we have anyone else on the board to speak at this time. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I've written down a few notes, so let me go through. So when it comes to, so I've got different constituents. The ones that are using your online, I assume it's like an app.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I hear in the community is that app, and maybe I should start with the bigger issue first, but that it does look like we are funneling an outside amount of our funds and our efforts into getting, left-wing ideology books on our shelves, or in this case, in our app. How do we, let's say that person's wrong, and we want to be able to demonstrate, no, we're not actually doing that. How do we oversee that? How would we know, short of, and I guess maybe I need to go get this app and look at it myself, but, the report I heard is that when there's, when you're going through the new offerings it's just one after another, and this person said, there's no reason why their algorithm or anything else would be feeding them more of that than otherwise. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'd actually have to take a look at that feed to see if there were some settings or look at the content too and see if there were particular titles that we should be purchasing. We do, Lynn and I are both classically trained, I would say, librarians, where we do believe in representing all segments of the community. And that means that we should have those, not just left, just to use your words, but also the right and also the center. So we need to make sure that if there's particular titles that we're missing, that we do look at those.
And then this is maybe as far as set up just for the overall county. Are we taking into account, and this also goes with Lakewood Ranch, one of the things when that discussion first came up that I heard from people afterwards, and now I'm seeing more of myself, as far as is the need for space for, say, a homeschool collective to have a place to go, or just those students. Are we moving on that front? Because if you just look at the number of hours and the amount of learning that needs to take place in a place other than, if someone has chosen for whatever reason to not have their child in a public school, it seems like that'd be a great partnership where we could fill in the gap to make spaces for that.
Absolutely. We'd love to have more homeschooling programming, and we do have a parenting and homeschooling collection in our youth areas. So we'd love to support that.
Okay. So, and do we have the space as far as, it seems like they need that, not a full-size, classroom, but also not just a cubby where one person would sit and read a book. You need that kind of intermediate space. Do we have things like that we're offering? Are we expanding those offerings? Is that in the works?
It really depends on the facility and what kind of rooms they have available. So I'll use Central as an example. We have a large meeting room that will hold maybe 100 people. We have a meeting room that will hold, I want to say 20, 25. And then we have a free group study room, which would hold maybe 10 if we're, for little ones. So as we look at new spaces, we do want to make sure that we're addressing that mid-size as well. So we would like to do that. Our new library location will have 2 large meeting rooms, but it will also have a smaller meeting room as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be a big opportunity for us to help in the community. Just in general, as far as me and where I'm at on some of this discussion, first of all, it concerns me, that when we start talking about, first of all, this debate has been set up where, either if you are in favor of, what we all consider, I would say, common sense with our, with the way movies are, marketed and presented. So you've got, a parent knows to expect one thing in a PG movie, something else in a PG-13. And then if they're taking their kid and they're telling the person at the ticketing counter, I'm taking my child to this R-rated movie, that's their decision as a parent. They need to be there to make sure that, that's something. So if they're, for whatever reason, but, I can think of, war movies that are, accurately depicted, or Passion of the Christ was an R-rated movie. But even if, it'd be a parent's decision in conjunction with that kid. So even if it's something that I might disagree with, that's not my space, but at least everyone knows where they're coming from and what they're looking at. From what I can tell, in a limited amount of research, it does not seem like the American Library Association would agree with that type of a synopsis of what we offer in libraries. They have joined cases with the ACLU against just basic, oversight as far as what children can have access to, what's put in front of them without a parent directly saying, no, I do want my child to see this. So they get involved in those cases. Not only that, but they put up a false argument over and over and over again. And that is, if you object to a book being in a children's space, you're a book banner. And that's not real life. That's not honest, intellectual debate. And it is setting up an argument wrong to where you're either all in one category or you're enlightened like us. And it seems to be through and through, the more I research, the more I find that the ALA seems to be very actively pushing a viewpoint. And I think that viewpoint, part of it is directly the plan is to subvert parents. I mean, you can read it in their own website. They're almost proud of it on how they can, marginalize people that object to what they're putting in front of children, and how you can go around them and how you can push certain things up to the forefront. So I see no reason, if we're the first library in the country to say we don't want to be a part of the ALA, and we're open to an alternative that is truly neutral, that would come forward, then I would be in favor of that. There should be at some point, if you're going to decide that you're a political organization, which as I look at their website, that is what they have decided. It's not pushing literacy. It's not teaching great programs. I'm sure you can find that on there somewhere. But what is front and center is doctrinal, ideology that they're pushing, and they're not hiding it. And so I think that, I would be 100% in favor at a voting member meeting of us leaving the ALA, the American Library Association, because of the stance that they've taken. As far as us here in the county, I believe it's important that if an objection is made to a book, either the placement or the money spent on it or the availability of it, if an objection is made, somewhere in that process, we need it to be able to get outside of, for it to be legitimate review, then it needs to get outside of the library system in and of itself. Otherwise, it hasn't actually gone to any type of neutral body or elected body. And so I would say that if we need to set up a procedure where if something is objected to, you take a look at it and it comes back that you think it's fine, that, parent objects again, then we need either to come before this board or someone that this board appoints, because we all, in matters of public discourse, self-policing is a good thing, but sometimes it has limits. And so if the same organization is repeatedly the one that's saying, no, this is fine, and I have not looked at any of these decisions, so I could very well agree with every decision that's been made for the last 5 years. So this is not, an indictment of anyone or anything. I don't know any of the people that are on, our current board that reviews these things. So they could just be doing a great job, and I could agree with everything or I could disagree with everything. That's not the point. The point is that we should go outside out of respect for that taxpayer, for that citizen, for that parent, oftentimes, but perhaps not a parent. We should have a system or a process that allows them to go outside of just the library and its board as it goes forward. So those are a couple of things I would like to see as we move forward in our library system. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. And our current speaking order then is Bearden, Ballard, and Ron. Commissioner Bearden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the great presentation. Really appreciate you spending the time and putting that together. How do you go about picking a research database for individuals that want to go in and actually do research?
That's a good question. So we will review them for user friendliness. We will review them for content, because sometimes you'll have a slick interface, but when you get deep in there, there's really no content.
Got it.
So, and then also cost.
Okay.
And public appeal. We don't want to spend money on something that's not going to be used.
Got it. And the reason why I'm asking this is I do a lot of research on businesses and things of that nature. And one of the things that I recognize that we didn't have in the public library system here in Manatee County was Reference USA.
Oh, okay.
I recognize it, and I had to go to Sarasota County in order to pull up Reference USA in order to gather the data that I needed. And I was just wondering why we don't have that here in Manatee County as of yet.
Probably a budgetary issue. I've used Reference USA before, and I really do think it's a wonderful resource as well.
Okay. My next question would be is how often are we monitoring what is being put as far as brochures go in our libraries? And are those being vetted before they're being put out, or is people just have a free rein to put out whatever they want?
They don't really have a free rein, but sometimes people will come in and just put things out.
Okay.
So we do try and clean those up, and we do try to offer an approval cycle. All of our policies, I will say, none of them sunset, but they do get a little stale. So we're reviewing all of those in a cycle. The display cycle, which includes that public material, is something that we're reviewing this year to put some sort of mechanism in place so that all of our staff know what is allowed to be put out in the public area.
Okay, because during election season, I was in the libraries in and out, and I saw people pushing agendas through brochures in the spot where people, I guess, you guys had it to where anybody could put brochures up, but I didn't know if there was any type of stipulation behind that. So maybe it's something we, obviously, as you said, need to look into to maybe tighten up a little bit, because I think that's important. I don't think we should be allowing organizations just to put their brochures in there. They're not paying for any type of marketing space or whatever that might be. And, I think there would be a lot of offensive going in regards to what's being put in those shelves. So
That is something that we want to review for, is accuracy and appropriateness in the public for information purposes.
great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Ballard.
Okay. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about our collection development policy. So I was able to go through that.
Okay.
As well as some of the what we're publicly pushing out and encouraging people to read on the website. For example, we have a Black History section on the website, which is great. And so I start looking through the recommended books in the Black History section. And so I see the 1619 Project. I see a biography of Angela Davis, famous Marxist. But what I don't see is I don't see any books by Thomas Sowell, the famous conservative Black thinker. I don't see any books about Condoleezza Rice. I don't see any books about Colin Powell. And so the books that are being pushed in this collection seem to have a certain bent, which I think that we need to try harder to make sure that we're giving that kind of content neutral approach and exposing people in our community to all kinds of to all kinds of Black history and all kinds of ideas. So that was one thing that kind of struck me. So I also was looking at the content development policy, and so we have a wide range of viewpoints and interests, individuals' freedom to read, view, or listen to material without infringement from other patrons. I completely agree with that. The public library is different than the school library. We should have a very wide range of views. And I just want to ensure that we actually have a very wide range of views. So, we don't want to consider the race, nationality, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or political or societal views of the author. And I think that all of that is great. So then I started actually going into our digital library and just doing some keyword searches. And this isn't perfect, obviously, because you're going to pick up some things, not pick up others. So, for example, if I typed in the keyword homeschool, we have a large homeschooling community, I got 45 books, which seems pretty low. Because I think that those homeschooling books, study aids, I think could be hugely important for people. And I think that we could do a better job of making sure that we have those. So then I looked at Catholicism, 115 books, which, pretty low. Then I typed in LGBTQ, and then I narrowed it to children's books, and I got over 200 books, 241 labeled as transgender kids books. And then I actually went in and started looking at some of the books. What are these books? Are these actually kids books? Yes, they are. About 5% of the population is LGBTQ. So it seems like we have a really kind of outsized focus on these books. Some of these books are actually even for preschoolers. You wouldn't know from the surface of looking at these books. A parent wouldn't necessarily even know that this is an LGBTQ book. There was one that was just called Calvin, for example. Cute little book. It was just a little kid on the front with big hair, and it just said Calvin. And it was something that I wouldn't have hesitated to rent for my child, because it's just a cute little storybook. And then I go in and look at the description, and it's about a transgender child, and it's a subject that would create a conversation that I'm certainly not ready to have with my 5-year-old or my 3-year-old. So I think that we need to do a better job of making sure that we know that these books exist, making sure that parents have that awareness. I know that we do have the policy that says that parents have to sign off on certain things, but I think that needs to be expanded. I think it needs to be more robust. And I will also add that I found one book that came from a so-called gender critical perspective. And there's a pretty big body of literature, and intellectuals who are coming at the transgender issue from a different perspective, and I'm not seeing that represented in our collection. So the one book that I was able to find was Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier, which talks about rapid onset gender dysphoria in young girls. And I appreciate that that's there, but I do think that we need to have more. Just another example, books on veganism. We have 281 titles. I went through them. Many, all of them are how to become a vegan cooking, all of those things. Maybe 5% of the population is vegan. Whereas on, survival skills, something that everybody could utilize, far fewer. If you look at Karl Marx, 50 books on or about Marx. But then if you look at some of the great libertarian thinkers or the Austrian school economists, zilch, nothing at all. So we have nothing by Robert Nozick. We have nothing by von Mises. We have 3 books by von Hayek.
What about Ayn Rand? Certainly.
I'm sure we have Ayn Rand.
Okay.
I didn't look for her specifically. So I do. People don't necessarily realize that they have a bent when they're picking these things out. And as someone who is a voracious reader myself, I have things that are in my collection at home that I consider essential or very important that the community doesn't have access to. And these are not things that are, these aren't topics that are fringe. These aren't topics that are way, out in the weeds. So I just want to make sure that we're truly giving this broad spectrum for people. So my suggestion is that we establish a citizen collection development work group, pulling people from all over the community, all viewpoints, so that, and I want intelligent, educated people who have very diverse viewpoints, who can lead us to make sure that we are having a truly diverse choices. I also would like to see the expanded policy on child rentals of adult materials and materials involving sexuality and gender. Those are my big things. So thank you.
Well, thank you, ma'am. We've certainly moved on from user fees, haven't we?
Yeah, yes, we have.
Okay. Commissioner Ron and then Commissioner Baugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Ballard, for bringing all that forward. That was really good. I got just a couple questions. One, on your vendor list, Baker Taylor, it seems to be who we order the majority of our books from.
Yes.
Are we making sure we're getting competitive pricing with them in comparison to other book distributors? I know in the past, they have somewhat of a dicey history in the past of overcharging back in 2013. And I just want to make sure that, we're getting the best competitive pricing from them that there is in comparison to who other the vendors are that are out there that can supply books to us.
No, that's a very good question. There's another company named Brodart that we did talk to about the opening day collection, which was that one-time push for the Lakewood Ranch materials. But Brodart came in at more cost per item than Baker and Taylor. And Baker and Taylor also provides pre-processing. They put the RFID tags in, and they put the Mylar covers on. They put a lot of that handwork into it, so they're ready to go on the shelf when they come in. So I do feel comfortable that Baker and Taylor is a valid vendor for us and the best use of our funds, because I don't want to spend more money on a book either. But we do talk to other vendors to make sure we are.
Recently, we've had some issues with displays within the library system, and I know Administrator Washington jumped right on that, and we appreciate that. Is there a committee or within the librarian system, whatever, that regulates what goes into our displays in our libraries so we don't have offensive or those type of things going in where people are walking to our libraries, children, those type of things are going to see these type of offensive displays?
Thank you. That's a very good question. As far as displays go, I would say that 99% of our displays are not panel displays, which is what we were talking about, or three-dimensional objects. They're usually books. They're just book displays. And internally, so everyone that operates at a system level reports to me. All the branches report to Lynn, and we do review what they're planning on putting up. We just review the subject, not item by item, because that would be a bottleneck in operations. And all of our branch managers, again, have advanced degrees so that they're able to evaluate those materials. Now, as Commissioner Ballard pointed out, nothing is perfect. So we need to continue to review that, and that is something that Lynn and I are continuing to strengthen.
Thank you. A couple more questions real quick. On the fact of what can be seen by young children and things like that walking through the library, are we sectioning off the areas where we consider things to be explicit and those children do not have access to those areas? Be it, do we have like a certain area where you got to be 18 years or older to get into, or are we doing things to protect the children from seeing explicit books or anything that's on the shelves?
We really don't carry those kind of books.
Okay.
We don't carry those, but we do shelve everything in the adult area, for books that are intended for adults, books that are intended for teens. Even in the juvenile area, if we feel that it is something that should be in the parenting collection as opposed to on the open shelves, we'll put it there. And if there's ever a doubt, like in T-ball, you can play up. So we'll put a teen material that might be on the edge of being adult, we'll put it in adult.
Okay, thank you. One last question. Have we considered using, to drive traffic to libraries, of considering using them as like some type of business hub to where someone could come in and come in with their laptop, create digital media, create print, do things like that, and pay us a fee to do that? To where a business guy could come in or lady could swing into the library, get on their laptop, hey, I got to print a report real quick. They don't have access to an office or something of that nature. Have we thought about doing that, or are we doing that right now?
That is something that Mr. Washington and I have talked about in the past. Within our current footprint, we'd have to do some remodeling. There are some spaces, our maker spaces, particularly at the downtown area. It might not suit all those needs, but it depends on what your business is.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think I'm next.
Thank
No,
you.
he just stepped out. He'll be back. So I want to make sure that I've got a full understanding of everything that I've heard and how these decisions are made as far as what books we have in our library. Who makes those decisions? Who buys the books? Who picks them out?
No, that's a great question. So right now, myself and Lynn are buying the books for the Lakewood Ranch collection.
Oh, great.
And we have a youth services department. There's 2 librarians there, and they consult on the youth materials. But then we have a collection development librarian who is not, she has other duties, but all of the material purchasing goes through her.
Okay. In my almost 11 years on this board, I don't recall us ever having a workshop to talk about the libraries and the materials that we have in them and so forth. So I'm glad that we are doing it now because I think we need to. I mean, I've done some research and, I'm not sure about the Library Bill of Rights. Okay, the way I look at it, maybe I'm incorrect, so you'll have to help me here. But I look at it from the standpoint that the libraries come under Manatee County government.
Yes.
We pay for them, the taxpayers, their money buys the books. And I will be honest with you, I got a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls about some of the displays. I think we all did, actually. Well, except for the new ones. I don't think they were on the board at the time. Because there was a display basically right when you walked in the door at one of our libraries that was really not appropriate. So I do know the administrator at the time went down there and got rid of it. So please explain to me in something like that, a display that's right there where you walk in the door, who sets up that display?
Add something to that,
Sure.
Commissioner Paul. And I think that we're all alluding to this certain display, and
I'm just going to
I
nail it.
don't want anybody to think that it's it's because it's an LGBTQ display.
No, it's not.
It was overtly political. Is my issue with it. So this is a huge display in the front of the library when people are coming in to vote at the library and giving all of this history and then saying, this president, reduced these rights. This president put these rights forward.
Exactly.
Almost conditioning voters to think about those issues right as they're going to vote. So that kind of overtly political display, especially on the weeks of early voting when people are coming into the library to make those big decisions, I think is why there was such an outsized response.
And not to mention, I'm going to carry that what she said is exactly accurate, but I'm going to carry it one step further. I don't think that was necessarily a display that should have been right where you walk in the door of the library. I think we need to understand that is to some people, it is a touchy situation. People don't want to see that the minute they walk in the door. So I am concerned on who are making these decisions. Why are we having these types of decisions made in our libraries? Because I'm going to be honest with you. I had people trying to make appointments with me to complain and wanting to come in and do something about our libraries and the way that this material was being handled. Mm-hmm. And I said, no. I said, I will not meet with you until the board has a workshop so that the board can discuss it and we can figure out where we are. Then I will sit down with you and have that discussion. I think it's too lax. I don't like a lot of what I've heard. And I'm not trying to put blame on any particular person. I'm just saying that I don't think that we have necessarily have it set up for appropriateness, perhaps the way we should. Mm-hmm. Some things are just not meant to be out in front of people when they walk into a library. I think anything sexual doesn't even need to be in the library, to be honest with you. That's a social issue. That is not something that, I look to my library to educate me on. You want to know something about that? You get on the internet, you do your homework. I don't think the majority of the taxpayers probably does not appreciate their money's being spent this way. So I'm just going to put it out there. I know we've kind of been all beating around the bush to some extent, But I'm not saying it's necessarily bad to have some of the things that are in the library. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that I don't think that we've perhaps displayed it appropriately and in the right place, for the public as a whole. And I think we need to be a little bit more on top of that. And there is no secret. I mean, obviously, Moms for Liberty and so forth, with them going into the schools, has brought a lot of this to the forefront. Perhaps it needed to be brought to the forefront because the word decency comes to mind. We've got to be more in tune with the public as a whole. And I say as a whole, but that means everybody, not just one particular group or two particular. It's everybody. As far as the books, that some of them that Commissioner Ballard brought up, shame on us. It sounds like to me we're promoting communism and so forth more so than a democracy, than a free country, a free state. I think we need to look at that. So I don't know that I think a citizens committee is good, but I think this board needs to set some guidelines about what we want to see and how we want to see it. This is not working. With what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, it's not working. So we've got to set up some guidelines. What the board would want to do on that, I have no idea. I'm only one commissioner, but if you're buying books right now to go in Lakewood Branch, you're getting in my area, that's a problem. I've got to go into Braden River, obviously, more than I have, because I've not noticed anything like that. But you can rest assured I'm going to be going. So I don't know what the answer is. That's why I wanted to know who is really in charge of our libraries. Is it another group, or is it Manatee County government? Because this is a very conservative county. We are pretty much a conservative state. So I think we just need better guidelines, more appropriateness in picking out books and so forth. And if we should be pushing anything, I think, in our libraries, it should be the Constitution. It should be the freedom that we have in this country, the form of government that we have in this country, especially here in our state. So, I am very concerned with what I've heard so far, because I knew Commissioner Ballard was doing her homework, I could tell, and she's been writing all morning notes. So I knew it was going to be good, because I know her thing. But some of it, I was really shocked to hear. So I don't know where we go from here, but I think this board, we need to have another workshop to really set some guidelines on how to move things forward. I think we do need a citizens committee to look at this. I'll even go this far. Over the weekend, I didn't really go on social media. I don't go on social media much anymore, but I will tell you, I did see one thing this weekend, and it was about, religion and government. Well, this government was based on God, and we seem to have lost that. And with what I'm hearing about in our libraries, we've really lost it. So we need to figure out, I think I already know where we are as a county. I know where we are as a board, and something needs to give. So that's all I'll say right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Washington, would you like to address the concerns of the board at this point, and then we'll move on to Commissioner Beard and then Commissioner Satcher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I can't touch on all the concerns that board members have today. It may take me a little bit longer to formulate my words to be respectful for all that are in the audience today. I will say that, I would like to offer a tone of calm and assurance to the board that we don't have a problem in our libraries. There may be some miscommunication, misunderstanding, but the policies and procedures that the library system of Manatee County uses has been brought before this body over the years. And I do agree that workshops are needed so that we can really get into the weeds of some of the current policies, procedures that this board would like to see edited, revamped, updated. But when we talk about displays, we're talking about a display that happened last year. And I would like to look at that as a one-off. Me as an individual, as a taxpayer, may have seen it one way, but with respect to the board and being mindful of the time of year in which it was, where it was located, the decision was made to take it down. But to clarify why it was in the display case, that is just a display case where all displays are located in the Palmetto Library. If you go there now, you will see the one up for Black History Month. When we speak about the platforms that the library currently uses for digital books, it's a platform that's used. We do not regulate what that platform does, but when you look at it and you happen to see particular books at the forefront, it's no different than when you go to Audible. The bestsellers are promoted in a particular way. Can we look at another platform that the board would agree upon? My only concern with that is even if we did do that, what you search for and what that platform may have on hand, you still may find issue with. So truly what's going to have to come out of this work session is more of a work session, more of a true direction of what this board would like to see and what safeguards reasonably that could be put into place, setting the right expectations for not only the board, but for those individuals that utilize the library, and more importantly to me, are the staff that we have working in the libraries. Because when you speak about the American Library Association, that is one of the highest standards for accrediting our librarians with master's degrees from all walks of life, from all different higher levels of education, different colleges, universities. But if we looked at all of the associations in which we find ourselves members of, I can assure you we would find fault with many of the things that may be currently doing. So I wouldn't say that we would divest all ourselves from those associations, because if you look at most of us around the table are Kiwanians. I can assure you not everything Kiwanians do, all of us agree upon, but as the acting county administrator and as the director of community and veteran services in which the libraries fall under, I am looking forward to the opportunity to speaking more to the board, getting direction what the board would like to see, scheduling as many workshops as you like to see so we can really get down to the nitty gritty and outline a policy moving forward so we can be extremely successful for the citizens of Manatee County. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Clegg, would you like to
Yeah, I'll just
provide
add a
some
couple
legal
of
guidance
things
as
because
we
there
go?
is some law on this. It's kind of questionable. There's a 1982 case, U.S. Supreme Court case called Board of Education v. PICO, and it was a divided court that talked about what First Amendment interests are there in the decisions about which books to offer in libraries. And I can tell you from experience, the ACLU cites it with abundance when you do something that they don't like. I've been through that early in my career. But on the other hand, you know, it's questionable where the court would come down on these issues today because the court has changed and a lot has happened since then. But I do think I want to go back to Commissioner Ballard's approach to this because I think it is important that however the board deals with it, we deal with it in a way that is politically neutral. That's really what that's your safe harbor, is to make sure that what you're offering in your libraries covers all points of views, not just one particular point of view. I think that it's a tough issue for a board of elected officials to deal with directly, you know, book by book, but putting together some form of advisory committee to keep an eye on things and to kind of, you know, vet them and weigh in on them is certainly something that is a legally defensible approach. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. So the speaking order is Bearden, Satcher, and Baugh. Commissioner Bearden.
So with Commissioner Ballard speaking in regards to our current inventory and there being more abundance in a particular subject opposed to the other, what can we do currently with our inventory that we may have more of to maybe possibly look at cutting that in half or maybe possibly selling those books so that we can level up the inventory that we have that are on both sides
That's a great question. So what we could do is we could take that subject, particularly economics. I think that that's something that's near and dear. So we would look at the economic thinkers, the great thinkers, and bring in all points of view.
Okay, so, but would we maybe, because it's going to cost us more to buy more books, right? Is there a way for us to cut costs by cutting some of the books that we currently have, maybe selling those books to a different library, maybe up in New York or somewhere in California, and then maybe leveling it up where there's 100 books on this side and 100 books on this side?
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Once the books have been circulated for a while, they really don't have a lot of resale value. But we could accommodate that kind of subject review within our current collection development budget.
Okay. Commissioner Thatcher, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going back, I mean, now we've gotten into some of the specifics. Let's talk about the Palmetto display.
Sure.
What was the approval process for that display? Who approved it?
So that was, we had a discussion, a brief discussion, saying that the branch leadership had been asked if they could put up a poster board display. It was a decade-by-decade history of a certain civil rights path for a particular group. And it did not take any county funds to produce that poster board session. It was done, but, okay, I just want to make sure. It was done by a third party in the community. So then we said, yeah, it's the right month for it. It's civil rights history, so we will, but we did not realize that it was going to be going in that display case. There was probably a better placement for it.
So I will take issue, with the, with Mr. Washington. I don't know that this is a case where we need to be more calm. This was early voting, so October or November. Here we are late February, finally addressing the issue. How much more calm can we be than 3 months to take a look at it? I just was going back to my video of that display, and it's so much worse than I even remembered. The very first thing that you see, first of all, the first thing you see is in our display case, a printed thing with you could use your camera, where they have the links with the, QR, thank you. QR codes totally looks like an endorsement from our library for what's in there. Second of all, it's right below my picture. Third of all, of all the major wars that have been fought by the United States of America, the one that is the greatest victory I believe we ever won was the Cold War. Because we didn't have to spend, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million lives to win that war. And the very first part of that display is taking Ronald Reagan, the man who is far and away more responsible than any other human for winning that war, has a picture of him. It is blacked out. His eyes, his pupils are literally colored red. With the next to it, it says AIDS Gate, or something along those lines. And I'm looking at the picture. So I'm not making this up. I didn't even realize how bad it was until I just went back and looked at the video. There's flag after flag after flag of we respect this group and we want this group to be, to have the same rights in the workplace as others. No, it is getting very specific into each thing. Everyone's got their own flag. And then their books, Jay's Gay Agenda. That's the name of the book. It's not me that brought this up. I did not bring this. We get accused of starting a culture war. No, the culture war was brought to us. I didn't write that book. I didn't put it underneath my picture. I didn't put a picture of a political leader there. It's literally Jay's Gay Agenda is the name of it. It's so obvious that this is an agenda that is being pushed, and we have been participating in it. And here's the thing, as soon as it gets brought to people's attention, all of a sudden we need to be calm and we need to be fair and we need to be non-political. Just hold back. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's have committees and let's have work sessions and let's just go real slow and wait. Why wasn't anybody going slow and asking for committees and asking for fairness when the stuff was being pushed? I feel like the only reason we want to, slow down is because it's been found out what people are up to. And so I don't know what, I wouldn't, if we were doing, you mentioned civil rights. So if we put up a civil rights display and we put a picture of Democratic Senator Byrd, who was a member of the KKK, right? And who, he was a senator for a long time. When I was growing up, 80s, 90s, and I'm not sure when he, departed, and him standing right next to Hillary Clinton, and we graded out, and we took their eyeballs and made them red. What would we be accused of at that point? And would it be time for calm? And maybe that is what we should do. Because, in that case, it's something that's true, and it's not being pushed on children. Those books and that organization in that display, those aren't adult books. Those are targeted at children. They're children's books for the most part. And they're at eye level for kids. And that display, I'm going to guess 18 inches deep. But it was, I counted it, it was, I believe it was 18 feet worth. No, it was 12 feet wide times 2. So 24 feet worth of display. And no one thought, you know what, this might not be a good idea. So, so I don't necessarily know that it's the time for calm. I feel like people that were behind that decision should have to make an account for that. And they should have to justify, I had no idea and I never saw it and no one ever told me what was there ahead of time. I would not have approved it if I had realized this, and I won't do it again in the future. And if that's not the discussion, if the discussion is people shouldn't have reported it and they're making a big deal out of nothing and calm down and make a committee, if that's the discussion, then my confidence in the people we have leading and making those decisions is gone. But if the conversation is, this was an absolute mistake, and I am willing to take responsibility for it, and I'm willing to put in procedures that this will never happen again, and here's how I propose to do it, but I'm open to other procedures to make sure this doesn't happen again as well, then that would be a conversation that I'd be fine with and we can move forward with. But I just don't agree that our real problem here is that we need to be more calm. I think maybe we need to take action on something like this and be sure that this type of thing never happens before. That's all I have now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have anyone else on the board at this time. Commissioner Ron.
But, excuse me, Ms. Mayor, thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for being at the last BOCC meeting where we had your husband there, and thank you for his service in the Marine Corps. Appreciate it. I got a quick question. Going back to access, Library Bill of Rights. The Library Bill of Rights focuses on removing barriers to access, removes barriers to accessing the internet and electronic resources. Inside the library system, do we have proper procedures put in place to where if someone under the age of 18 were to get onto a computer or whatever, they cannot access certain sites, and which would be something that would be explicit, or are there any parameters or something put on our computers in our library system to where if something were to be accessed, it'd be automatically shut down? And access, to me, means it's open access to everybody. So I'm just, again, concerned about making sure that in our library system that our children are protected, our children aren't being exposed to, something that I might not consider explicit, but some other parent might consider explicit, those type of materials. And are we continuing safeguards to make sure that happens?
Thank you for your question. Yes, there is a filter on the public computers for under 18. And I'm sorry, to the second part of your question about restriction access, could you restate that?
Well, I just want to make sure that in our library system that a kid walks in there, walks into the adult section. There's no, you got one librarian, maybe two librarians working in the library, and that somehow they can go in. Back in the old days, if you went to Blockbuster and you wanted to get an explicit video, it was in the back room. I don't know how I know that, but some people told me about that. But that's what I make sure what happens with our kids when they're going into our libraries, that they don't have the ability just to walk happenstancely into an area that is strictly reserved for adults. I mean, some people think Catcher in the Rye is explicit. I don't. But I mean, but just to protect our kids from having that ability to get in there, because that's what we're hearing from our constituents is that it's just kind of wide open, and that a child could come into the library, could go into an adult area or the older area for older teens or whatever, and get something that's not, that they should not be reading or was not approved by their parents to be reading, be whatever the book is. That's the question I'm asking. Is that protection? Are those protections in place?
The library is laid out in such a way that the materials that are intended for adults are in one area of the library. And then the juvenile area, and when I say juvenile, I mean board books, picture books, early readers, chapter books, everything that up to about age 12 are in one area. And then we have a teen section. They are in different spaces. Now, we don't have people guarding or, in between there. We really don't have the staffing for that. However, in our conduct policy, we do request that parents accompany their children to the library. So that's my answer.
Okay, but if like 16 or 18, the parents need to accompany?
Under 12,
Under
they need
12?
to be with an adult.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that is it's part of the state statutes. But we often don't see that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Ballard, and then Commissioner Thatcher.
So I actually have a suggestion that could be helpful, at least for some of these kind of early readers or younger books that are potentially have sexuality or LGBTQ topics. Oftentimes at the library, you have these little labels that are right on the outside of the book, and they'll have things like Christmas, Halloween. I find it very, very helpful because at different times of year, I rent different books for my kids. Or even I think you have ones that say like Christian, just to give a parent an idea of what it is that they're renting for their kids or getting into. Maybe for these topics, that little outside sticker label would be helpful for parents. For example, for that one little book that I mentioned, where if you look at the cover, you're going to have no idea what that subject matter is. So that's just one suggestion. Then my other suggestion is for some of those young adult books, I did say that we need to expand the parental consent. What does that look like? I have the thought of a separate consent for young adult books, coming of age books, books involving drugs. Because I will say, again, as a kid who read a lot, even 20 years ago, or when I was reading these books, there were certain books that I read that my parents would not have approved of. They weren't on LGBTQ topics, but there were definitely coming of age stories, stories about drugs, all kinds of things that, had my parents known that I was reading them, they definitely would not have approved, and they're things that I wouldn't approve of my kids reading when they're 12 years old. So I don't know how you can cordon off those books or group them. I know that for staff that would be a kind of a difficult thing to do. But I do think that it would be really helpful, and I do think it would give parents a little bit more confidence in those, especially in those young adult books.
If I can add to respond to that a little bit, we do have a parenting area, and Lynn and I have been exploring expanding that because, again, as parents, we would like to have an opportunity to find the right book at the right time to have that conversation with our children. My children are grown, but for having those conversations, and we do believe in that. Oh, may I add one other thing about so at any point, if a child has their own library card, a parent can access that account to see what they have checked out.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I'm getting refreshers. So I was inaccurate, and so I apologize. The display, as I watched the video that I made, was actually 3 levels. So, 36 feet, linear feet, 12 feet times 3. And the top level was above my eye level, and the middle level was at my eye level, and then the bottom level was at a child's, eye level. And the children's books that are in the display, looking closer at which books we're aware, the children's books that were part of the display are at kids' eye level. The Jay's Gay agenda and the something about camp, something about coming out at camp, those were at kids' eye level. So for me personally, I'm one of 7, but for me personally, I just don't want to walk away from this meeting. We're taking county time. We've got the public here. This is on an agenda. I don't want to walk away from this with us all saying, yep, we're going to work on it more, and we'll have more, more committees and stuff. Do we disagree? I think it's important that we're clear. I believe that was that display was pushing an agenda, obviously pushing that agenda. It brings up political figures as much as possible in there. I just saw where there's other politicians that are mentioned in it, and it's definitely telling people what to think as much as it can. Do we have an agreement that was inappropriate, and we won't do, we will never deliberately, go down that road again? Or do we have, or is our position here today that, that we should have looked closer, and we'll take a little, be a little more calm and careful next time? I feel like I'm one of 7. I need that question answered today, Mr. Washington. Do you believe that I'm wrong? Or do you believe that the display was inappropriate and wrong? I don't see any middle ground there. To have that display, I'm not saying I'm not asking that people have to agree with me, right? As far as how they feel about what's in the display. They could like it or not, but was that proper use of library resources, display place, and to say we don't endorse, I think that's a little disingenuous. You go to the grocery store, and the things they want you to buy are on the end caps. And our end caps in our libraries are, every time I've ever been in, it's never been I don't want to go beyond. I'm not there every single day. Maybe I'm wrong. But the ones I see are generally left-leaning, groups or events that they're promoting on those end caps, and in this place in a display case. But that's maybe that's a separate issue. It's not separate, it's related. But as far as this particular one, I feel like if we disagree about this, then we really disagree. Because I don't know how it could be much more overt that it was beyond the scope of the role of a publicly funded library. So I would like to dialogue because I want to walk away from here with an answer on that. Okay. And if no one's ready to say, Mr. Satcher, you've got a point, that was not the right use of our display place and resources, et cetera, then at least we have some clarity moving forward. I think we need to get there, though, because this is, how much more time are we going to give to this issue? So,
Yeah, let's go ahead and pose the question then to the administrator, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Satcher, for the clarification. I'm not going to tell you that you were wrong. I will tell you that, to repeat what was said in October when this all came about, the display itself, knowing all the things that we know about it today, it probably wasn't our best judgment to put it up. So there we do agree. But the more important thing to me, sir, and I want to keep repeating that this board sets the policy. But what's extremely more important to me is that these meetings are televised, and we're saying some things that can be misunderstood as inflammatory when we're talking about our staff. And if there is, again, more conversation needed to be had about what this board would like to see in our library systems, with the suggestions that you've given us today, and we're taking notes, we will do that. But when we speak about my entire comment of calm, it's talking about every single thing that was discussed in this section of the work session, not the display. So again, to reiterate what I said in October, it wasn't the best judgment to put it up. Knowing what we know today, those types of things are vetted by not only the library staff, but myself as an individual county administrator acting, as well as the director of CVS, sir.
All right, thank you, sir. We have one last commissioner on the board, and then we'll go to public comment. Commissioner Baugh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Washington. That was a good comment. I do have a question. Is it not feasible to have any sexual orientation material of any kind? Yeah, let me put that in, of any kind, in, one spot? Whether it be for children, adults, whatever you want to call it, which I don't agree with that, but whatever. Isn't it possible to have anything that might be questionable in one area so that parents know and we don't allow children in there? Is that not feasible? And if not, why?
In general, they are together. By the Dewey Decimal System, it would be grouped together in the adult area.
Okay. All right, well, and I think, Mr. Washington, you hit it right on the nose. We set the policy. So obviously, we're going to have to meet again and set that policy so that we kind of make it very clear on what we want to see and how we want to see it. But, I think this has been enlightening, and I really do appreciate you being here with us today, so that we can perhaps be on the same page and work better together and give better quality service to our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'm glad, I was worried we were going to go all the way through a libraries discussion and no one was going to reference the Dewey Decimal System. So I'm glad that it came up at some point. Commissioner Ballard is sneaking in here at the last minute, so we'll go to her.
I do just want to thank you for being here. I do want to be a friend and a great liaison to the library. I do absolutely believe in freedom of expression, and so I want us to have a productive relationship. So just, I don't want anything that I said today to be misconstrued, but I do think that there's room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So now we're going to open this up to public comment. So if there's anyone from the public who would like to come forward at this time to speak about anything we discussed during today's workshop, that would include the presentation we had and discussion we had regarding the clerk's investment strategies, or public library systems, now would be the time to come forward. And when you step up to the microphone, please make sure that the light at the base of the microphone is green. Please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board on topics discussed during today's workshop.
Hi, I'm Julie Perry. I'm a resident of Manatee County. I'm also a friend of the library system. I appreciate your inviting the public to this meeting. We are very grateful to have a gem of a library system here in Manatee County. This is beyond books, folks. This is not just books. Our libraries brings our community together with various programmings for us all, young, adults, senior citizens. It brings us all together for various reasons, for all of us humans of all ages. Libraries, I encourage you to explore. I mean, you say that you research and you saw one display. Do you go and see the displays? The displays are remarkable. Go and see what they're all about. They're informative, they're historical, they represent much more than you have been talking about today. Oh, this session has really enlightened me of the narrow-mindedness that I'm seeing here. Trust our librarians. They are professional, educated, professional librarians who have curated. This is what they do. Would you want somebody who is not in your profession telling you what to do in what you do? I mean, you wouldn't. In real estate, you wouldn't ask Tammy to come in and take over. No. So trust our librarians, trust our libraries, open your minds, be again, open to what our libraries have to offer. They are not just books. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board on topics discussed in today's workshop.
Hi, my name is Deanna Brinkley from Manatee County. I have a question about the All Access Pass with the schools. I know that all students at the beginning of the year have access to the libraries with their student ID. That gives them access to everything, K through 12. I know that the parents don't have access to those accounts because it's a student account and it didn't go through the library. So are there fail-safe parental guides, or how does that work with the school system?
So this is not a time for dialogue, but your question will likely be answered at the conclusion of public comment.
Good question.
Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Yes. First name, last name, county of residence. You have 3 minutes to address the board on topics discussed in the work session.
Hi, I'm Shannon Keever. I'm the Communication Director for Women's Voices of Southwest Florida, and I am also a homeschool mom and an avid library user. I live in Manatee County, Bradenton. Librarian Joe Goodwin said, "A truly great library contains something in it to offend everyone." And I, for one, am appreciative that there are some materials in the library that offend me even. The ALA library website, or the ALA website, says that libraries have diverse collections with resources from many points of view, and a library's mission is to provide access to info for all, I wrote information for all users. And this is to protect the First Amendment rights of all of the citizens. The library should be accessible for everybody who lives in this county. That includes children, that includes families, that includes people experiencing homelessness, that includes teachers and students. I spent probably 20 hours a week in libraries when I was in college. I think that when we're talking about, although we should definitely be concerned about, yes, what our own children are reading and accessing, when we're talking about potentially censoring books, that really takes us on a slippery slope when it comes to the public libraries. I personally take my children to the library all the time. I'm surprised I haven't run into you there, actually, Commissioner Ballard, because I'm there all the time with my little ones. All the different libraries. I like all of them. We have accessed so much information from science, presentations. They've done parties. We go, actually, Commissioner Satcher, you're asking about homeschool. And the Downtown Public Library on Monday afternoons has makerspace at 2 p.m. for homeschooling families. They also have a science club there that's really popular with the homeschooling families. And my little 6-year-old, you guys have probably seen her, is the most inquisitive person in the world that I know and asks me questions all the time. How does this work? How does that work? Why does this do that? And the science club has been really great for helping me to educate her. I just don't feel comfortable talking about selling off books that we don't agree with. I'm all for bringing in more. I think that possibly a lot of bookstores and libraries that I've seen have cafes in them. That's a way to bring in jobs and bring in money, maybe, that could help us access more materials. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, please state your first name, your last name, your county of residence. You have 3 minutes to address the board on topics discussed
My
in
name is
today's
James
work session.
Cullen. I'm a resident of Manatee County. I previously, on January 18th, sent a detailed letter to each of you commissioners in hard copy and electronic form. I just want to expand a little bit upon that today. My main points in that letter was that seems to be a disproportionate quantity of woke materials in the library, and LGBT and transgender. Our brothers and sisters of that persuasion, woke persuasion, transgender, they are certainly entitled to have books on that subject in the library, but my issue is proportion. In the 2 notorious propaganda books about anti-American screed, 1619 Project and A People's History of the United States, there's 5 or 10 copies of each of those, total lies, total anti-American propaganda, and virtually nothing debunking those. Another issue I'm very concerned about is the young adult section. When I was 13 years old, my parents did not consider me a young adult. They considered me a young teen. I hope that's probably true today. The young adult section, according to the ALA definition and the library, and by the way, the ALA is a left-wing woke propaganda organization. They define young adult as 13 to 17. Unfortunately, that's a young teen. But so the 13-year-old can go to the library and look at books such as, for example, one called Let's Talk About It. Okay, graphic depictions of naked bodies, male and female, and bodies having parts of both. And so this is young adults, 13-year-old accessing that material. This particular book, it's just one that I saw. It's got encouraging masturbation, encouraging 13-year-olds to look at pornography on the internet, to engage in all manner of sex. So as I say, I'm not a book banner. I am in favor of banning child sexual predation. So I'm in favor of protecting the children, 13-year-old and through 17, from material that does not belong in the definition of young adult but should be considered adult. I have some more thoughts. I will send you an email, but I appreciate all you commissioners taking the time to discuss this issue. I think it's very important to protect our children.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Sir, please state your first and last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board.
My name is Jack May. I live in Manatee County. I am the president of an organization called Manatee Patriots, which meets tonight at 6 o'clock. That's a shameless plug. I appreciate the entire system of libraries. I think it's a great thing. I've been to countries, I have been stationed in countries that don't have what we have. I think this is wonderful. But inevitably, it's the small things that give us issues, and the small thing is protecting our children. Now, some people may think that is being overly protected. But the fact is, my concern is that
if a parent, I mean, we have great statute in Florida about what pornography is. And I'm sure that there are books in our libraries that would meet that. You say there are none, but we found, as in our public school system, that that's not true, that these books are here. So my question is, you've got 18 and unders, parents sign and they have access, but if a parent would allow a child to check out a book that would fall under the pornography statute, and he could not buy that book if he went to a store, would you check that book out because the parent said it's okay? Because that is against the law. That's my question. I'm sure that you will answer it at some other point in time. If you want to have further discussion with me, please come tonight to Manatee Patriots.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward? Yes, ma'am. First and last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board on topics discussed in today's workshop.
Hi, Sherry Luke, resident of Manatee County. Braden River is my library, or the branch library. I just want to say I'm from Wisconsin. I've been down here 6 years, and I am just totally thrilled with our library system, the number of programs and opportunities that we have for the different levels, the kids, the teens, the number of programs that we have. I was going through not too long ago, I wanted to register for a program, and I just was amazed with the number of things that were offered, and I'm really happy to be part of the system. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, state your first and last name, your county of residence, and you have 3 minutes to address the board on subjects discussed in today's workshop.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Martens. I live in Bradenton, and I'm a transplant from New York, and I do know Steve Pico, who had that case, because I went to school with him. When I was a kid, Island Trees High School banned books, and I was very upset because I was 18 years old, and I thought that we should have the freedom to read everything. Now I'm looking at it from the other side, and I've been working with the schools, actually reading through some of the books, and I realized that as a young person, I was wrong because as a parent, we have a different viewpoint. And so I've done some questioning and some research, and I don't understand, is our library got 2 levels, you're a child or an adult? Because there's a lot of books in our library that are labeled young adult. And if young adult is just an interest, I don't know, but we have all of these wonderful computer systems. Why can't we match up access to the appropriate age level so that this doesn't happen? And the other crossover I'm concerned with is the All Access Pass, which is, it was a wonderful idea back during COVID to give kids access to the entire library system, but not without restrictions. And it seems to me that they've been given access without restriction. So God forbid they're reading some of the books that I'm screening. It's a horrible thing. So we need to protect our children. I came to Florida for the conservative values, and I really want to see Manatee County reflect those conservative values. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We don't applaud. No, we don't applaud, Commissioner Baugh. Is there? Well, you're married to her. I think you have to applaud. Or you'd be in trouble. Is there anyone else who would like to come forward for public comment at this time to address the board? Okay. Seeing no one, we will not adjourn. Commissioner Baugh would like to make a final statement.
Just one quick statement. I meant to say it earlier, so I apologize, but she just reminded me. You know, I'm older. Don't you say a word, Commissioner Cruz. I'm the oldest on the board. I've seen a lot. I've been around for a long, long time, and I can tell you I have 4 children, and I have 10 grandchildren. So I know that I look at things differently. I'm looking at Commissioner Cruz as I say this. I look at things differently because I've been around longer, and I've seen more. So I just appreciate the comments that I've heard here today. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So it's 12:04. I think we had a good discussion today, and we covered a lot of important business. So we're going to adjourn this workshop.